You think your money makes you better than everyone else. The words exploded across LaGuardia's business class lounge, turning every head. Daniel Cross, billionaire CEO, Forbes cover story, single father hanging on by a thread, stood frozen as a young woman with fire in her eyes pointed an accusing finger at his chest. He'd been awake for 36 hours. His son was home with a fever. His nanny had quit. And now this stranger was dismantling him in public, every word a knife twisted in wounds she couldn't see. He didn't defend himself. He never did anymore. If you want to know how a collision at 30,000 feet changed everything, stay until the end. Like this video and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights of LaGuardia Airport's Terminal C hummed with the particular frequency of exhaustion that only transcontinental travelers understood. Daniel Cross stood at Gate 47, his Tom Ford suit perfectly pressed despite the chaos of the last 18 hours, his leather carry-on at his feet, and his entire world crumbling behind a mask of practiced composure. His phone vibrated for the 14th time in 20 minutes. He didn't need to look to know it was Margaret, his executive assistant, with another crisis that somehow couldn't wait until he landed in San Francisco. Before that, it had been Dr. Reynolds with test results that made his stomach clench. Before that, his housekeeper Maria with the news that yes, Liam's fever had climbed to 101.3, and no, the backup nanny still hadn't called back. Daniel rubbed his eyes beneath his glasses, a gesture he'd trained himself not to do in public, then did it anyway. He was 42 years old, had built a tech empire worth $3 billion, employed over 15,000 people across 4 continents, and right now he couldn't remember if he'd packed his son's allergy medication in the kitchen drawer or his own suitcase. Final boarding call for Flight 1847 to San Francisco. All remaining passengers, please proceed to the gate. He gathered his bag, moving through the crowd with the unconscious efficiency of someone who'd spent half his life in airports. This was supposed to be a quick trip, keynote at the Tech Innovation Summit, dinner with potential investors, back home by Thursday morning in time to take Liam to his follow-up appointment. 3 days. 72 hours away from a 7-year-old boy who'd already lost his mother and didn't understand why Daddy had to keep leaving. The thought sat in Daniel's chest like a stone. He was third in line at the gate when he felt the impact. Not hard enough to hurt, but sudden enough to make him stumble. His leather bag hit the floor, papers scattered, and a female voice, sharp with frustration, cut through his exhaustion like a blade. "Oh, for the love of... Can you watch where you're standing?" Daniel turned slowly, bending to retrieve his documents. The woman behind him was younger than he'd expected from her voice. Mid-20s maybe, with dark hair pulled into a messy bun and eyes that blazed with the kind of righteous anger that came from a very bad day meeting an immovable object. That object apparently was him. "I apologize," he said quietly, reaching for a scattered report. "I didn't realize." "Of course you didn't." She crouched down, snatching up her own spilled belongings, a battered laptop bag, a coffee-stained folder, a paperback novel with a cracked spine. "People like you never do." Daniel paused, a quarterly earnings summary halfway to his briefcase. "People like me?" She gestured at him with one hand while shoving items back into her bag with the other, the movement jerky with barely controlled stress. "Yes, people like you. Designer suit, first-class ticket probably, expensive watch." Her gaze raked over him, cataloging and dismissing in the same breath. "Standing in the middle of everything like you own the place, completely oblivious to everyone else trying to get by." Something flickered in Daniel's chest. Not anger, but something older and more familiar. Recognition, maybe. He'd heard variations of this assessment his entire adult life. Usually from people who had no idea he'd grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, learning to code on a computer he'd built from parts salvaged from a dumpster behind his high school. The suit was Tom Ford. The watch was Patek Philippe. The exhaustion was bone deep and real, and the guilt about leaving his sick son was eating him alive, but she couldn't see any of that. She saw the costume he wore to navigate a world that judged success by its packaging. "You're right," he said simply, gathering the last of his papers and standing. "I should have been more aware of my surroundings." I apologize for the inconvenience. The agreement seemed to surprise her. She stood too, adjusting her bag on her shoulder, and for just a moment Daniel saw past the anger to the exhaustion underneath. She had shadows under her eyes that matched his own. Her clothes were professional but worn. The coffee stain on her folder looked recent and catastrophic. She was having a terrible day. He was having a terrible day. And now they'd collided in the specific hell of airport boarding procedures. She started, then stopped, shook her head. Whatever, just watch where you're going. Absolutely, Daniel said, and meant it. She pushed past him toward the gate agent, who was watching their exchange with poorly concealed interest. Daniel heard her fumbling with her boarding pass, heard the agent's polite confusion, heard the edge creep back into the young woman's voice as she explained something about a ticket change and a confirmation number that wasn't pulling up in the system. He should board. He should walk away. He had enough complications in his life without absorbing a stranger's airport drama. Instead, he stood there, briefcase in hand, and listened to her frustration build with each failed attempt to resolve whatever ticketing issue had occurred. The gate agent was apologetic but firm. The system showed what the system showed. Perhaps if she called the airline's customer service number. I've been on hold with customer service for 90 minutes, the woman said, her voice cracking slightly. I was supposed to fly out this morning. They canceled my flight. They rebooked me. I got the confirmation email. I have the confirmation number right here. The gate agent's expression was genuinely sympathetic. I understand, miss, but I don't have any record of final boarding call for flight 1847. This is your last call. Daniel watched the woman's shoulders sag, watched her pull out her phone with shaking hands, probably to find that customer service number, probably to miss this flight too. He thought about Liam, about missed connections and broken promises, about all the times Daniel himself had stood at a gate feeling the walls close in. He stepped forward. Excuse me, he said to the gate agent, his voice carrying the particular quality that made people listen, not loud, but weighted with certainty. Is there a supervisor available? The woman spun toward him. I don't need your help. I know you don't, Daniel replied calmly, meeting her eyes. But I'm offering it anyway. Amanda, he added, reading the gate agent's name tag. I understand system errors happen. Is there any way to manually verify her reservation while we're still boarding? I'd hate for her to miss this flight over a technical issue. Amanda hesitated, looking between them. Then, perhaps recognizing something in Daniel's demeanor, or perhaps just wanting to end the holdup, she nodded. Let me call my supervisor. It'll just be a moment. The woman stared at Daniel like he'd grown a second head. Why would you, after I just... Bad days happen, he said simply. And technical errors are nobody's fault. He paused. Well, they're someone's fault. Probably mine, actually, given what my company does. But not yours, and not hers. That startled a laugh out of her, short and sharp, but genuine. Your company? Tech infrastructure. Cloud systems, mostly. The kind of things that crash at the worst possible moment. He offered a small smile. It's a living. Before she could respond, the supervisor arrived, a woman in her 50s with efficient energy and quick hands on the keyboard. 2 minutes later, the mystery was solved. The rebooking confirmation had been issued but hadn't synced with the gate system. The woman's boarding pass printed with a soft mechanical whir. Seat 27B, the supervisor said warmly. You should still have time. Thank you for your patience. The woman took her boarding pass, stared at it like it might disappear, then looked at Daniel. I was awful to you. I basically called you an entitled... You were frustrated, Daniel interrupted gently, and you were right that I wasn't paying attention. We're even. She opened her mouth, closed it. Something complicated moved across her face. Embarrassment, maybe, or the particular shame that came from lashing out at the wrong target. Thank you, she finally said. Really, I'm sorry for all of that. Don't be. I hope your day gets better. She nodded once, then hurried down the jetway. Daniel watched her go, then handed his own boarding pass to Amanda. That was kind, the supervisor said quietly. Daniel shrugged. She needed help. I was there. Still, most people would have. She trailed off, professional discretion taking over, but Daniel knew what she meant. Most people in expensive suits didn't stop to help stressed out strangers who'd just publicly insulted them. Most people weren't Daniel Cross. He made his way down the jetway, the familiar metal tunnel that always felt like a transition between worlds. Behind him, Liam's fever, the board's pressure about the Q3 earnings, the investors circling like sharks who smelled blood in the water. Ahead, 72 hours of performance, of being Daniel Cross, the visionary CEO, instead of Daniel Cross, the exhausted single father who'd cried in his car last Tuesday after Liam asked why mommy couldn't come back from heaven. The plane was nearly full, passengers already settling in, stowing bags, fighting for overhead space. Daniel found his seat in business class, 2A, window, the configuration he requested on every flight because at least there he could control one small thing, and settled in with practiced efficiency. He pulled out his laptop, opened his presentation for tomorrow's keynote. The words on the screen blurred together. He read the same slide 3 times before admitting defeat, closing the computer and pressing his forehead against the cool window. Liam's face floated in his mind. Those huge brown eyes, so much like Sarah's, the gap-toothed smile, the way he'd clutched Daniel's hand this morning and whispered, "Daddy, my throat hurts," in a voice so small it had broken something fundamental in Daniel's chest. "I know, buddy," Daniel had whispered back, pressing his lips to Liam's too warm forehead. "The doctor's going to make you feel better, and Daddy will be home so soon, I promise." Promises. He'd made so many, kept most of them. But the ones he'd broken, those haunted him. The flight attendant appeared at his elbow. "Mr. Cross, can I get you anything before we take off?" He shook his head, managed a polite smile. "I'm fine, thank you." She nodded and moved on, and Daniel let his eyes close. Just for a moment. Just until takeoff. Then he'd work on the presentation, review the investor deck, return the 47 emails currently sitting in his inbox marked urgent. Just a moment. He was almost asleep when he heard the commotion. Raised voices from the front of the plane, a flight attendant's apologetic explanation, a passenger's confused response. Daniel's eyes opened just as a familiar figure appeared in the aisle of business class, escorted by a concerned flight attendant and looking like she'd seen a ghost. The woman from the gate, the one who'd crashed into him, the one he'd helped. She was staring at a boarding pass like it had personally betrayed her, and the flight attendant was gesturing to a seat 3 rows ahead of Daniel. "But I booked economy," the woman was saying. "There must be some mistake. I can't afford—" "It's been taken care of, miss," the flight attendant said kindly. "Complimentary upgrade due to the earlier ticketing issue. Please, just enjoy the extra space." Daniel watched understanding dawn on her face, watched her gaze sweep the business class cabin like she was searching for something, someone. She didn't look at him. Maybe she didn't recognize him from this angle, or maybe she was too overwhelmed to notice. Either way, she sank into her seat, 4C, aisle, with the shell-shocked expression of someone whose terrible day had just taken an unexpected turn. Daniel settled back against his seat, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. He hadn't made the upgrade himself. That would have been overstepping. But he'd mentioned to the supervisor that if there were any available seats in business class, it would be a nice gesture given the circumstances. Apparently the message had been received. Small kindnesses. They were all he had these days, the tiny moments where he could make something better for someone without it costing him something he couldn't afford to lose. The plane began to taxi. Daniel returned to his laptop, to the presentation that would shape his company's next quarter, to the performance that never ended. But part of his attention, a small, curious part, remained aware of the woman 3 rows ahead, the stranger he'd collided with, the person who'd seen his suit and his watch, and made assumptions that weren't entirely wrong, but weren't entirely right either. He wondered what her story was, what had made her day so terrible, where she was going and why. Then the plane lifted off, New York fell away beneath them, and Daniel let it go. Let her go. He'd done what he could, made one person's day slightly less awful. That was enough. It had to be enough. The flight was smooth. Daniel worked through his presentation, refined 3 slides, answered emails until his eyes burned. Somewhere over Ohio, he gave up and ordered coffee. Black, no sugar, the kind of fuel that had gotten him through 1,000 similar nights. The flight attendant brought it with a warm smile. "Here you go, Mr. Cross. Can I get you anything else?" He'd stayed in too many hotels, taken too many flights. They knew his name now, knew his preferences. It should have felt like success. Mostly it just felt like exposure. "I'm good. Thank you." She left, and Daniel cradled the cup between his palms, letting the heat ground him. His phone buzzed, airplane Wi-Fi, the curse of the connected age. A text from Maria. "Liam's fever broke, 99.1 and asking for pancakes. I told him you'd make them when you get home." Daniel's chest loosened. He typed back, "Best news all day. Tell him I love him and I'll make a whole stack, chocolate chips too." 3 dots appeared, then, "He says he loves you infinity times infinity." Daniel closed his eyes against the sudden burn. Infinity times infinity. That's what Sarah used to say. How she'd measured her love for their son, for Daniel, for their small, perfect family. And then she was gone. An aneurysm at 32, no warning, no chance to say goodbye. And Daniel was left trying to be infinity for a 5-year-old boy who didn't understand why mommy wasn't coming home. 2 years. It had been 2 years, and some days it felt like yesterday. Other days it felt like a lifetime ago, like Sarah was a dream he'd had once, beautiful and heartbreaking and ultimately unreal. But Liam was real. The fever breaking was real. The promise of pancakes was real. Daniel held on to that. The pilot announced their descent into San Francisco. Daniel packed up his laptop, straightened his tie, rebuilt the armor he wore into the world. By the time the plane touched down, he was Daniel Cross again, CEO, visionary, the man on the Forbes cover who'd revolutionized cloud infrastructure and done it all while maintaining a mysterious private life that reporters loved to speculate about. Nobody needed to know that the mystery was just grief and exhaustion and a 7-year-old boy who still sometimes crawled into Daniel's bed at night because the darkness felt too big alone. The plane taxied. Passengers stirred, reaching for bags, preparing for the shuffle to the exit. Daniel waited, as he always did, letting others go first. No need to rush, the hotel would hold his room. The keynote wasn't until tomorrow. He had nowhere to be except another empty hotel room in another unfamiliar city. He was gathering his things when he saw her stand. The woman from the gate, from the upgrade, now stretching in the aisle and looking significantly less stressed than she had 4 hours ago. She pulled down a small suitcase from the overhead compartment, and Daniel noticed her hands were steadier now, her movements less frantic. Good. Whatever crisis had been chasing her seemed to have eased, at least temporarily. She turned, scanning the cabin, and her eyes landed on him. Recognition flared. Then something else, embarrassment maybe, or concern. She hesitated, clearly debating whether to approach, whether to acknowledge what had happened. Daniel made it easy for her. He nodded once, a simple acknowledgement, then returned to packing his briefcase. Permission granted. They could both move on, strangers who'd intersected briefly and would never meet again. She took the exit. Daniel followed several minutes later, joining the river of travelers flowing through SFO's familiar terminals. His driver was waiting at baggage claim, a quiet man named Richard, who'd been driving Daniel for 3 years, and understood that sometimes silence was the greatest kindness. "Good flight, Mr. Cross?" "Uneventful," Daniel replied, which was as close to good as flights got these days. The drive to the hotel took 40 minutes through San Francisco traffic. Daniel answered more emails, reviewed his schedule for the next 3 days, tried not to calculate how many hours until he could get back to Liam. The math was depressing. His hotel suite was pristine and impersonal, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, a king bed that was too large for one person, a workspace with monitors that Richard had arranged to be set up in advance. Daniel dropped his bag, loosened his tie, and stood at the window watching the city lights blur against the darkening sky. His phone rang. Margaret. "You made it," she said without preamble. "Good. We have a situation." Daniel closed his eyes. "What kind of situation?" "The Jensen account. They're threatening to pull out of the renewal unless we can guarantee the new security protocols will be implemented by Q4. We already guaranteed that. It's in the contract. They want a personal assurance, from you, tomorrow, before your keynote." Of course they did. Because nothing in Daniel's life was ever simple, and every success had to be fought for twice. Set it up, early, 7 a.m. if possible. Done. Sending the briefing documents now. A pause. "Daniel, you sound tired." "I'm always tired, Margaret." "Yes, but usually you hide it better." Her voice softened. Margaret had worked for him for 8 years, had known Sarah, had been at the funeral. She was one of the few people who saw past the suit. "How's Liam?" "Fever broke. He's asking for pancakes." "Then you'd better get home soon and make them. He's a persistent little negotiator. Learned from the best." Despite everything, Daniel smiled. "I'll be home Thursday morning. Save Friday for the all-company meeting prep." "Already on your calendar. Get some rest, Daniel. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." She hung up. Daniel stood there a moment longer, then turned from the window and opened his laptop. The Jensen briefing documents were already in his inbox. He had 4 hours to master every detail, anticipate every objection, craft responses that would keep a $10 million account from walking away. He ordered room service, something he wouldn't taste, wouldn't remember, and worked until midnight. Then 1 a.m., then 2 a.m., because sleep meant dreams and dreams meant Sarah, and waking up alone in a hotel room after dreaming about his dead wife was a special kind of torture Daniel had learned to avoid. At 3 a.m., he finally gave in. Took a shower, fell into bed, set his alarm for 5:30. At 3:17, his phone rang. Daniel grabbed it without looking, heart hammering, because middle-of-the-night calls only meant one thing. "Maria, is Liam—" "Mr. Cross?" An unfamiliar voice, male, professional. "This is Detective Morrison with the SFPD. I'm sorry to disturb you, but we need to ask you some questions about an incident that occurred earlier this evening." Daniel sat up, fully awake now, adrenaline burning through exhaustion. "What kind of incident?" "A break-in at your company's San Francisco office. The night security guard was injured. We're trying to piece together what was taken and why. Your head of security said you'd want to be notified immediately." "Is the guard okay?" "He's at San Francisco General, concussion, some bruising. He'll recover." Daniel was already out of bed, reaching for his clothes. "I'm on my way to the office now. 20 minutes. "Mr. Cross, it's 3 in the morning. This can wait until—" "Someone hurt one of my people," Daniel said quietly. "It can't wait." He was dressed in 5 minutes, in a car in 7, at the office in 18. The building was lit up like a crime scene, because it was a crime scene. Yellow tape and police cruisers and officers taking statements from shaken night staff who'd never expected their quiet shift to end in violence. Daniel walked through it all with the calm focus that had built his empire, answering questions, reviewing security footage, learning that the perpetrators had bypassed 3 levels of encryption to access the server room, and that, yes, it appeared they'd copied files, though which files and how much data remained to be seen. By 5 a.m., he was in an emergency conference call with his security team and legal counsel. By 6 a.m., they'd contained the breach and begun damage assessment. By 6:45, Daniel was in a fresh suit, third coffee of the morning in hand, walking into a conference room to personally assure the Jensen account that their data was secure, had never been compromised, and remained protected by the best security infrastructure in the industry. He was convincing because he believed it, because he'd spent 12 years building systems that didn't fail, protocols that didn't break, and a reputation that meant something more than marketing speak. The Jensen executives left satisfied. The contract renewal was signed before Daniel's keynote at 10 a.m. He delivered that keynote on 3 hours of sleep and pure willpower, talking about innovation and infrastructure and the future of cloud computing to an audience of 3,000 people who hung on his every word. They saw Daniel Cross, visionary. They saw success in a suit. They didn't see the exhausted father who'd been awake for 27 hours, the widower who'd learned to function on grief and coffee, the man who'd built an empire on the foundation of loss and kept building because stopping meant feeling, and feeling meant breaking. The keynote ended to standing ovation. Daniel smiled, thanked them, and walked off stage into the wings where Margaret was waiting with his phone. "Liam called," she said gently. "He wanted to tell you he's feeling better and he finished his homework and he loves you." Daniel took the phone, saw the missed call, felt something crack in his chest. I'll call him back from the car. Daniel, I'm fine. You're running on fumes. I'm always running on fumes, Margaret. That's the job. She studied him with the particular expression of someone who'd known him long enough to see through the performance. The job is what you make it. You don't have to do this alone. Yes, Daniel said quietly. I do. Because Sarah was gone. Because Liam needed a father who could provide stability and security and a future. Because Daniel had learned at 7 years old that the only person you could really depend on was yourself. And that lesson had been reinforced at 14, at 22, at 32, when the woman he loved died in his arms, and he'd had to explain to their son that mommy wasn't coming home. He'd built a company worth billions, employed thousands, changed an industry, and he'd never felt more alone. The next 2 days blurred together. Investor meetings, strategic planning sessions, crisis management for the break-in that turned out to be corporate espionage from a competitor desperate enough to commit felonies. Daniel handled it all with the same calm efficiency, made decisions that would shape his company's future, and counted the hours until he could go home. Thursday morning, 6 a.m., he was on a plane back to New York. By noon, he was walking through his front door in Manhattan, and Liam was launching himself into Daniel's arms with the force of a small, healthy missile. Daddy, you're home. You're really home. Daniel caught him, held him, breathed in the scent of child shampoo and grape juice, and home. I'm really home, buddy. I missed you infinity times infinity. I missed you more than that, Liam said seriously. I missed you infinity times infinity times infinity. That's pretty big. The biggest. Liam pulled back, studying Daniel's face with those huge brown eyes. You look tired, Daddy. I'm okay. Better now that I'm with you. Are you going to make pancakes? Absolutely. Chocolate chips? And whipped cream. Daniel laughed, real and exhausted and genuine. You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Cross. They made pancakes together, Liam chattering about school and his friend Marcus and the science project they were planning about volcanoes. Daniel listened, asked questions, flipped pancakes, and felt the tension of the last 3 days slowly drain away. This was real, not the keynote or the investors or the empire. This 7-year-old boy covered in chocolate chips and smiling like the world was full of good things. This was what mattered. After breakfast, after Liam went to play, Maria found Daniel in his study, staring at reports he wasn't really reading. You did good, she said quietly. With what? Coming home. Being here. Not every parent in your position would prioritize it. Daniel looked up at her, this woman who'd helped raise Liam when Sarah died, who'd seen Daniel at his worst and stayed anyway. He's all I have, Maria. Everything else is just noise. She smiled sadly. I know, but maybe someday you'll believe you deserve more than just noise. She left him with that thought. Daniel sat in his study, surrounded by the evidence of his success. Awards on the wall, articles framed, photos of him with presidents and CEOs and innovators who'd changed the world. And there, on his desk, a single photograph, in a simple frame. Sarah laughing. Liam as a toddler in her arms. Daniel's hand on her shoulder, all of them caught in a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. Before loss, before everything changed. He touched the frame gently, then turned back to his reports. The noise, as it turned out, was relentless, and it was easier than feeling. So Daniel Cross, billionaire CEO, single father, man behind the suit, did what he always did. He worked, and he survived, and he told himself that was enough. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made Manhattan look like a postcard. Daniel stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office on the 47th floor, coffee cooling in his hand, watching the city wake up beneath him. From this height, the people were abstractions, the traffic a distant hum, the chaos of 8 million lives reduced to something manageable and small. He preferred it that way. Distance made things easier. Behind him, his office door opened without a knock, the privilege Margaret had earned through 8 years of keeping his life from completely unraveling. Morning briefing in 10, she said, setting a fresh stack of folders on his desk. The new hires from the acquisition start today. HR wants you to do a welcome address at 11. Daniel turned from the window. Can't you do it? I could, but you're better at the inspiration speech, Makes them feel like they joined something meaningful instead of just getting absorbed by a corporate machine. We are a corporate machine, Margaret. Yes, but you make it sound noble. She paused, studying him with the particular look that meant she was about to say something he wouldn't like. You've been home 4 days, and you already look exhausted again. Did you sleep at all this weekend? Liam had a soccer game Saturday, birthday party on Sunday. We went to the Natural History Museum. Daniel moved to his desk, shuffling through the folders without really seeing them. I slept fine. Liar. Functional liar. Margaret sighed, a sound 8 years in the making. The board meeting is Thursday. Coleman is going to push again about expanding into South America. He's got 3 other board members backing him now. Daniel's jaw tightened. Richard Coleman, old money, older ideas, newest board member who'd bought his way into influence and seemed determined to prove that Daniel's success was luck rather than vision. South America isn't ready for our infrastructure model. I've said this 5 times. He thinks you're being risk-averse, says the company is losing its innovative edge. He can think whatever he wants. The data doesn't support his position. Daniel, Margaret's voice softened. He's building a coalition. You need to manage this carefully. I know. Daniel set down his coffee, suddenly too bitter to finish. Schedule a one-on-one with him before Thursday. I'll walk him through the analysis again. Already done. Wednesday at 2. This was why Margaret was irreplaceable. She anticipated the disasters before they metastasized. The morning briefing was standard: quarterly projections, client updates, the ongoing cleanup from the San Francisco security breach. Daniel listened, asked pointed questions, made decisions that would ripple through departments he'd never visit. By 10:30, he'd solved 4 crises and created 2 new initiatives that would keep his senior team busy for months. By 10:45, he was reviewing the acquisition paperwork for the 15th time, looking for the flaw he knew had to be there. You didn't build a company like his without developing a healthy paranoia about things that seemed too good to be true. DataVision had been too good to be true. A small firm, brilliant team, proprietary algorithm that could have taken them to the top if they'd had better leadership and deeper pockets. Instead, they'd run out of runway, and Daniel's company had acquired them for a fraction of what they'd be worth in 2 years. The team was solid, young, hungry, talented. Exactly the kind of people Daniel had built his empire with. He just hoped they understood what they'd signed up for. At 11 sharp, Daniel walked into the glass-walled conference room where 23 new employees waited with the particular tension of people whose entire futures had just changed. They were younger than he expected, mid-20s mostly, a few in their early 30s. The kind of age where the world still felt conquerable and failure was just a theory. Daniel had been 27 when he'd started his company, 29 when Liam was born, 32 when Sarah died, and the world stopped feeling conquerable at all. "Good morning," he said, and the room quieted instantly. He'd learned years ago that authority wasn't about volume, it was about certainty. "I'm Daniel Cross. Welcome to Cross Technologies." He saw the recognition in their faces. They knew who he was. Forbes covers, TED Talks, the keynote addresses that shaped industry conversations. He was a celebrity in their world, and that made this harder, not easier. "I know this transition hasn't been easy," Daniel continued, moving to the front of the room, deliberately casual, approachable. "Acquisitions are disruptive. Your company was your family, and now you're being absorbed into something bigger and different. Some of you are probably wondering if this was a mistake. If you should have held out, tried to raise another round, kept fighting independently." He saw several people shift uncomfortably. "Good. Honesty was better than platitudes." "Here's what I can promise you," Daniel said. "We acquired DataVision because your work is extraordinary. Your algorithm is years ahead of anything else in the market. We don't want to absorb you. We want to amplify you. Give you resources, infrastructure, reach. Let you do what you do best without worrying about payroll or funding or survival." He paused, meeting eyes around the room. "But I won't lie to you. This will be hard. Our standards are high. Our pace is relentless. We fail fast and learn faster. If you're here just to coast, you'll be miserable. If you're here to build something extraordinary, you'll thrive." Someone in the back raised a hand, a young man with nervous energy and thick-framed glasses. "What happens if we don't fit in? If the culture clashes too much?" "Fair question," Daniel respected it. Then we figure it out together, he said simply. I'm not interested in forcing people into boxes that don't fit. If there's a problem, we solve it. If there's a conflict, we address it. Communication isn't a weakness here, it's a requirement. Another hand, this time from a woman near the front, with sharp eyes and sharper posture. What about creative control? Our algorithm is our baby. We don't want it diluted or compromised to fit some corporate strategy. Daniel smiled slightly. I built this company from nothing because I refused to compromise my vision for investors who didn't understand it. I'm not going to ask you to do what I wouldn't do myself. Your algorithm is your domain. My job is to make sure you have what you need to make it better. The tension in the room eased fractionally. Not gone, but softened. Daniel spent the next 20 minutes answering questions, explaining structure, introducing team leads who'd be their primary contacts. He was good at this. The performance of leadership, the careful balance between authority and accessibility. It came naturally now, after years of practice. What didn't come naturally was the moment when she walked in. The conference room door opened, and Margaret appeared with an apologetic expression that meant something had gone wrong somewhere. Daniel, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the last member of the data vision team just arrived. Flight delay from San Francisco. She stepped aside, and Daniel's entire world narrowed to a single point of recognition. The woman from the airport walked into his conference room. She was mid-sentence, apologizing to Margaret, pulling off her jacket with the frazzled energy of someone who'd been running, and then she looked up, saw him, and froze. Daniel watched the recognition move across her face in slow motion. Confusion, disbelief, horror. The color drained from her cheeks. Mr. Cross, Margaret was saying, oblivious to the sudden tension crackling through the air. This is Emma Sinclair, lead developer on the data vision algorithm. Emma, this is... We've met, Daniel said quietly. Emma stared at him like he was a ghost or a nightmare. Her mouth opened, closed. No words came out. The rest of the room had gone silent, everyone sensing something significant was happening but not understanding what. Daniel made a decision in the space between heartbeats. He could humiliate her, mention their airport encounter, make her squirm. He was the CEO. He had that power. Or he could be the man his son believed him to be a CA. Sinclair and I crossed paths briefly in New York last week, Daniel said smoothly, his tone professionally neutral. I'm glad the flight issues resolved themselves. Please, join us. It was a lifeline, and he saw her grab it with shaking hands. She nodded mutely and found a seat in the back, still pale, still staring at him like he might explode. Daniel continued the meeting as if nothing had happened, finished his welcome address, introduced the integration timeline, answered 2 more questions. And through it all, he was excruciatingly aware of Emma Sinclair in the back row, radiating mortification so intense it was practically visible. When the meeting finally ended, people filed out in clusters, chatting, comparing notes. Emma bolted for the door like the room was on fire. Miss Sinclair, Daniel called out, his voice carrying enough authority to stop her mid-flight. A moment, please. She turned slowly, and he saw her steel herself, shoulders back, chin up, preparing for execution. The room emptied. Margaret left last, closing the door behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded ominous. They stood there 20 feet apart, CEO and new employee, stranger and stranger who'd collided in an airport and said things that couldn't be unsaid. I owe you an apology, Emma said, before Daniel could speak, the words tumbling out, rushed and desperate. What I said at the airport was completely out of line. I was having the worst day of my life, and I took it out on you, and I had no idea who you were, and that's not an excuse, but I'm so sorry, Mr. Cross. I understand if you want to fire me. I would fire me. I was horrible. Daniel let her finish, watching the anxiety pour out of her in waves. When silence fell, he spoke carefully. You weren't horrible. You were stressed. I called you an entitled. You made assumptions based on limited information, Daniel interrupted. We all do it. You were just honest enough to say it out loud. Emma blinked. You're not firing me? Should I be? I insulted you in public, and you're my boss now, and I didn't know, and Emma. His use of her first name stopped the spiral. Take a breath. She did, shakily. You're here because you're brilliant, Daniel said, Because your algorithm is revolutionary and your team speaks about you like you walk on water. What happened at the airport has nothing to do with your professional capabilities. But I was so rude. You were human. Daniel moved closer, reducing the distance between them, making this a conversation instead of a judgment. I've had worse said to me by people who knew exactly who they were talking to. And honestly, you weren't entirely wrong. That surprised her. I wasn't? I do wear expensive suits. I do have first-class tickets. I was standing in the middle of the gate area, not paying attention to anyone around me. He paused. The part you got wrong was assuming that makes me better than anyone else. But you couldn't have known that from a 30-second interaction. Emma studied him with open confusion, like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Why are you being so nice about this? Because his son had asked him yesterday what made someone a good person, and Daniel had said it was how you treated people when you didn't have to be kind. Because Sarah had believed everyone deserved second chances. Because Daniel had built an empire on the foundation of people giving him opportunities he hadn't earned yet. Because everyone has bad days, he said instead. And because I'd rather judge you on your work than your worst moment. Something shifted in her expression. Relief, maybe, or the beginning of trust. Thank you, Mr. Cross. I promise I'll... Daniel, he interrupted. What? Call me Daniel. Mr. Cross makes me feel like my father, and trust me, nobody wants that. He offered a small smile. We're going to be working together. Might as well start with honest communication. Emma nodded slowly. Okay. Daniel. She tested the name, then seemed to remember something. The upgrade. On the flight. That was you, wasn't it? That was the airline compensating for their system error. You told them to do it. I suggested that if space was available, it would be good customer service. Daniel shrugged. You'd had a rough morning. Seemed like the least anyone could do. You helped me. After I was awful to you. You needed help. I was there. That's all. Emma shook her head, something like wonder crossing her face. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. They stood there for a moment, the tension finally draining away, replaced by something tentative and undefined. New beginning, maybe? Or just the absence of disaster. I should let you get settled, Daniel said. Margaret will have your onboarding schedule. If you need anything, I'll figure it out, Emma said quickly. I don't want special treatment because of, the airport incident where you called me entitled? She winced. Yeah, that. Fair enough. But Emma? Daniel waited until she met his eyes. The offer stands. You're part of this team now. We take care of our people. She nodded, something vulnerable flickering across her face. Why are you doing this? Really? Daniel thought about Liam's question, about what made someone good, about the kind of man he wanted to be when his son was watching, even when his son couldn't see. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. And because I think you're going to do extraordinary things here. I'd hate to lose that because of a bad first impression. Emma smiled then, genuine and surprised and warm. Well, I guess I'd better live up to that. I guess you better. She left and Daniel returned to his desk, to the endless stack of decisions waiting for his attention. But for just a moment, he let himself feel something that had been absent for a long time. Hope. That maybe he'd made the right call. That maybe giving someone a second chance would matter. He didn't know yet just how much it would matter, how much everything was about to change. But he would learn. The next 2 weeks blurred together in the particular chaos of integration. The data vision team settled into their new space on the 42nd floor, close enough to the executive suite to feel valued, far enough to maintain their own culture. Daniel watched from a distance as they found their rhythm, established their territory, began transforming from acquired asset to integral team. Emma Sinclair was everywhere, leading stand-ups, debugging code at midnight, arguing passionately in design reviews. Daniel heard about her before he saw her. His department heads mentioned her in status meetings, praising her technical instincts, her leadership, the way she pushed her team without breaking them. She's something special, Marcus Chen, Daniel's CTO, said during their weekly one-on-one. Doesn't back down when she knows she's right, but listens when someone has a better idea. That's rare. Daniel nodded, making notes, filing the information away. He told himself it was standard due diligence, monitoring a key acquisition asset. He didn't examine why he noticed when Emma arrived early, stayed late, or why he'd learned her coffee order from watching her in the break room. Black coffee, 2 sugars, despite looking like she'd prefer something sweeter. Practical intelligence gathering, he told himself. Understanding his people. The lie was comforting, even if unconvincing. Thursday's board meeting arrived like a scheduled execution. Daniel prepared meticulously because Richard Coleman was predictable in his ambition and dangerous in his connections. The South America expansion proposal would come up again. The votes were probably already decided. Daniel just had to make sure they decided in his favor. The boardroom on the 48th floor was all glass and steel, designed to intimidate and impress in equal measure. 12 seats around a marble table, each occupied by someone wealthy enough to move markets and arrogant enough to think they should. Daniel took his seat at the head of the table and waited for the performance to begin. It began exactly on schedule. Coleman started with quarterly results, positive but not spectacular, which he spun into evidence of stagnation. Then came the pivot to opportunity, to growth, to the untapped markets in South America that were just waiting for cross-technologies to sweep in and dominate. "We're leaving billions on the table," Coleman said, his voice pitched for maximum impact. "While we consolidate domestic markets, our competitors are expanding globally. We need to be bold. We need to be smart," Daniel countered calmly. "South America presents infrastructure challenges that don't align with our current model. Internet penetration, regulatory frameworks, political instability. These aren't problems we can throw money at and solve." "That's exactly the kind of risk-averse thinking that kills companies," Coleman shot back. "You built this empire by taking chances, Daniel. When did you become afraid?" It was a deliberate provocation, designed to make Daniel react emotionally. He'd seen it coming from 3 moves away. "I took calculated risks based on solid data," Daniel said evenly. "Not expensive gambles based on gut feeling. If you can show me data that supports the South American expansion, I'm listening. But my competitors are doing it isn't strategy, it's panic." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Coleman's smile was sharp. "I have data. Projections from 3 consulting firms, all showing significant ROI within 18 months. Consulting firms you paid to tell you what you wanted to hear. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious decision, one that could cost us hundreds of millions if we get it wrong." Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping into the register that meant he was done being diplomatic. "I'm not afraid of expansion, Richard. I'm afraid of stupid expansion. Show me a plan that accounts for the real challenges, not a fantasy scenario where everything goes perfectly, and we'll talk." The vote, when it came, was closer than Daniel liked, 7-5 in his favor, which meant Coleman had peeled off 2 more board members since last quarter. Daniel made note of who voted which way. You didn't survive at this level without keeping score. The meeting adjourned, people filed out, and Daniel stayed behind, gathering his materials with the slow deliberation of someone trying to settle their anger before it became visible. "That was well played." Daniel looked up. Victoria Stern, the longest-serving board member and the closest thing Daniel had to an ally in that room, stood by the windows, watching the city below. "Was it?" Daniel joined her. "Feels like I'm losing ground." "You're losing patience," Victoria corrected. "There's a difference. Coleman is a parasite looking for something to feed on. He'll keep pushing until he finds a weakness." "I don't have weaknesses." Victoria's laugh was dry. "Everyone has weaknesses, Daniel. The question is whether you know what yours are before Coleman does." She left him with that pleasant thought. Daniel returned to his office, dove back into work, and tried not to think about board politics or Coleman's ambitions or the slow erosion of control that came with success. You built an empire, you gave pieces of it away to investors and board members and stakeholders, and then you spent the rest of your life fighting to keep them from destroying what you'd created. It was exhausting. His phone buzzed. A text from Liam's school. "Mr. Cross, Liam had a small incident on the playground today. Nothing serious, but please call when you have a moment." Daniel's stomach dropped. He dialed immediately. The conversation was brief and reassuring. Liam had fallen, skinned his knee, cried for 5 minutes, and was now fine. But could Daniel maybe pick him up a little early today? Just to be safe? Daniel looked at his schedule. 3 meetings, 2 conference calls, and a strategy session that had been on the books for 6 weeks. He canceled everything. By 3:30, he was at Liam's school, watching his son limp dramatically toward the car with a Band-Aid that seemed far too small to justify the performance. "Daddy, I was so brave, I only cried a little bit." Daniel scooped him up, careful of the injured knee. "I heard. You're incredibly brave, buddy." "Can we get ice cream for my bravery?" "Absolutely not. You're clearly suffering too much for ice cream." Liam's face fell. "But, Daddy, pizza instead, and a movie, but only because you're so brave." The dramatic suffering disappeared instantly. "Really? Really?" They went home, ordered pizza, watched an animated movie about dragons that Liam had seen 4 times and still found hilarious. Daniel let work emails pile up, let calls go to voicemail, let the empire run itself for 3 hours while he sat on the couch with his son and remembered what actually mattered. This moment, this child who loved him unconditionally and thought Daniel hung the moon. Everything else was just noise. By the time Liam fell asleep, on the couch, mid-movie, with pizza sauce on his chin, Daniel felt more settled than he had in weeks. He carried Liam to bed, tucked him in, stood in the doorway watching him sleep. Sarah had done this, stood here in this exact spot, watching their son dream, and Daniel had taken it for granted. Assumed they'd have decades of doorway moments, of pizza nights and skinned knees and ordinary magic. He'd been wrong. Now he hoarded these moments like a miser, knowing how quickly they could be taken away. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Emma's team just had a breakthrough on the algorithm integration. Preliminary tests show 40% improvement in processing speed. This is huge." Daniel read it twice, then typed back, "Good work. Schedule a presentation for Monday. I want to see it." He should have felt excited. 40% improvement was extraordinary. It could change their entire competitive position. But standing in Liam's doorway, watching his son sleep, Daniel mostly felt tired. The empire demanded everything. And he kept giving it, because what else was there? Monday's presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the main conference room. Daniel arrived 5 minutes early, coffee in hand, to find the space already packed with senior staff who'd heard rumors about the breakthrough and wanted to see it firsthand. Emma stood at the front, laptop connected to the massive display screen, looking simultaneously confident and nervous. She dressed up, blazer instead of her usual hoodie, hair actually styled instead of thrown into a messy bun, making an effort for the presentation that could define her future at the company. Daniel found a seat in the back, deliberately unobtrusive. This was her moment, not his. She started with context, the problem they'd been trying to solve, the constraints of the existing system, the theoretical improvements they'd hoped to achieve. Her presentation style was clear and passionate, technical enough to satisfy the engineers in the room, but accessible enough for the executives who'd forgotten how to code. Then she showed the results. The room went silent. 43% improvement in processing speed, 62% reduction in server load, integration so seamless that existing clients could upgrade without disruption. It was, in Daniel's professional assessment, a minor miracle. "This changes everything," Marcus breathed from his seat near the front. "Emma, this is incredible." Emma flushed with pride but kept her composure. "It's a team effort. Everyone contributed, but you led it," Daniel said from the back, his voice cutting through the growing chatter. The room quieted. "This was your vision, your architecture. Give credit where it's due." Emma met his eyes across the room, and something passed between them, acknowledgement, maybe, or the beginning of mutual respect. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'm proud of what we've built." The meeting dissolved into technical discussions and strategic planning. Daniel stayed for most of it, asking pointed questions, pushing for details, ensuring this wasn't just impressive in theory, but viable in practice. Every answer Emma gave was solid, thoughtful, the work of someone who'd anticipated the objections and prepared accordingly. Daniel made his decision. "Start implementation planning," he said. "I want this deployed to beta clients within 6 weeks. Emma, you'll lead the rollout." She blinked. 6 weeks? That's aggressive. I know. Can you do it? "Yes," she said immediately, no hesitation. "We can do it." "Then do it." You'll have whatever resources you need, staff, budget, access. This is priority one. The meeting adjourned with unusual energy. People left excited, talking, planning. Daniel watched Emma pack up her laptop, saw the weight of new responsibilities settling on her shoulders. He approached as the room emptied. "That was exceptional work," he said quietly. "Thank you. I'm terrified I'm going to screw up the rollout." "You won't. You don't know that." "Yes," Daniel said, "I do." "You know why?" Emma shook her head. "Because you care too much to fail. And because you're smart enough to ask for help when you need it." He paused. "That's all leadership is, Emma. Caring and not being too proud to admit you don't have all the answers." "Is that what you do?" "That's what I try to do." Daniel smiled slightly. "Doesn't always work, but I keep trying." Emma studied him with that same curious expression from the conference room weeks ago. "You're really not what I expected." "You mentioned that." "I mean it more now than I did then." She hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why me?" "For the rollout lead. Marcus has more experience. Jennifer knows the client side better. Why put this on someone who's been here 3 weeks?" Honest question. Deserved an honest answer. "Because you have something they don't," Daniel said. "You see this technology as more than just code. You understand what it could mean for people, for businesses, for the future. That's rare. I'd rather bet on someone with vision than someone with just experience." "That's a big bet." "I've made bigger. Usually they pay off." Daniel picked up his own materials. 6 weeks, Emma. Show me what you can do." She nodded, determination settling over the fear. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't." He left her there, returned to his office, and dove into the 100 other things demanding his attention. But part of his mind stayed on Emma Sinclair, the woman from the airport who'd called him entitled, who'd somehow become essential to his company's future, who looked at him sometimes like she was trying to solve a puzzle she didn't have all the pieces for. He understood the feeling. He looked at himself the same way most days. The next 6 weeks were brutal. Emma's team worked around the clock, and Daniel found himself checking in more often than strictly necessary, reviewing progress reports, attending stand-ups he could have delegated, making himself available for questions that his CTO could have answered just as easily. He told himself it was due diligence, protecting a critical initiative. He didn't examine why he noticed when Emma looked tired or why he'd started keeping granola bars in his desk drawer after overhearing her mention she forgot to eat when she was coding, or why seeing her smile when something worked made his entire day feel lighter. Those were dangerous thoughts, the kind that led to complications Daniel couldn't afford. So he focused on work, on Liam, on the board meeting where Coleman would undoubtedly try again to undermine Daniel's authority. And he absolutely did not think about the brilliant, passionate woman 5 floors down who'd crashed into his life and somehow started mattering in ways that had nothing to do with quarterly projections. He absolutely didn't. The lie wasn't even convincing to himself anymore. The lie shattered completely on a Wednesday night at 11:47 p.m. when Daniel found himself standing outside the 42nd floor development lab, telling himself he was just checking on progress, knowing full well he was lying. Through the glass walls, he could see Emma hunched over 3 monitors, her face illuminated by code that scrolled past faster than most people could read. She'd been there since 6 a.m. He knew because security logged entry times, and he'd started checking them with a frequency that should have embarrassed him. Daniel pushed open the door. Emma didn't look up. "The integration tests are failing," she said without preamble, her voice rough with exhaustion. "Something in the handshake protocol. I can see it happening, but I can't find where the code is breaking." Daniel set down the coffee he'd brought, black, 2 sugars, from the good cafe 3 blocks away that stayed open late, and moved to look at her screens. "Show me." She pulled up the error logs and Daniel leaned in, scanning lines of code with the rusty familiarity of someone who'd started as a developer before becoming a CEO. He hadn't written production code in years, but the logic was still there, buried under layers of board meetings and strategic planning. "There," he said, pointing. "Line 847. Your variable declaration is referencing the old schema structure. The integration is looking for a field that doesn't exist anymore." Emma's eyes widened. She scrolled to the line, stared at it, then dropped her head to her desk with a thunk. I'm an idiot. I've been staring at this for 6 hours, and it's a variable name. You're not an idiot. You're exhausted. Daniel pulled up a chair. When's the last time you slept? What day is it? Wednesday. Then, Monday, maybe? She lifted her head, and Daniel saw the dark circles under her eyes, the pallor of someone running on caffeine and determination. We deploy to beta clients in 2 weeks. I can't afford to sleep. You can't afford not to, Daniel countered. Exhausted developers make stupid mistakes, like spending 6 hours hunting a variable name. I don't have time for stupid mistakes. Then go home. Sleep. Come back fresh tomorrow. Emma shook her head stubbornly. I need to fix this tonight. Run the tests again, make sure the integration... I'll do it. She blinked. What? I'll fix the variable, run the tests, monitor the results. You go home and sleep for 8 hours. Daniel met her incredulous stare calmly. I do remember how to code, Emma. I started this company writing every line myself. You're the CEO. You have better things to do than debug my code. Actually, I don't. My son is at a sleepover, my calendar is clear until 7 a.m., and I'm too wired to sleep anyway. It was mostly true. Liam was at his friend Marcus's house, and Daniel had been dreading the empty apartment, the silence, the memories that always surfaced when he was alone too long. Let me help. Emma looked torn between pride and pragmatism. Pragmatism won, barely. You're sure? Completely. If you break something, I'll take full responsibility. Now go before I make it an executive order. She gathered her things slowly, like leaving the lab physically pained her. At the door, she turned back. Daniel? Yeah? Thank you, really. I know I'm probably being obsessive about this, but I want it to be perfect. I know, Daniel said softly. That's why it will be. She left, and Daniel turned to the monitors, rolled up his sleeves, and dove into code for the first time in 3 years. It felt like coming home to a house you'd left behind, familiar but strange, full of memories and muscle memory that hadn't quite faded. He fixed the variable, ran the tests, watched the integration protocols execute flawlessly, each handshake completing in milliseconds, data flowing seamlessly between systems that had been fighting each other hours ago. Beautiful. This was what he'd missed. The immediate feedback of code, the binary simplicity of working or broken, the satisfaction of solving a puzzle that had concrete solutions. Running a company was nothing like this. Running a company was navigating politics and personalities, making decisions with incomplete information, managing conflicts that had no right answers. It was necessary and important and utterly exhausting. This was pure, clean, real. Daniel worked until 4 a.m., optimizing code that didn't need optimizing, refactoring functions that worked fine but could work better. When he finally stopped, the integration suite was running 30% faster than when he'd started. He left a note on Emma's desk. Tests passed, took the liberty of optimizing a few bottlenecks. Sleep well. D. Then he went home to his empty apartment, took a shower, and got 3 hours of sleep before Liam's friend's mother dropped him off at 6:30, full of stories about the sleepover and demanding pancakes. Daniel made pancakes, listened to stories, drove Liam to school, went to the office and pretended he hadn't spent half the night debugging code like some nostalgic programmer trying to recapture his youth. Emma found him at 10 a.m., bursting into his office with wild eyes and the note clutched in her hand. You optimized my code, she said without preamble. Margaret, who'd been mid-sentence about quarterly projections, stopped talking and looked between them with poorly concealed interest. I had time, Daniel said mildly. Margaret, can we continue this later? Margaret gathered her materials with a knowing smile that Daniel chose to ignore. Of course, Emma, good to see you. She left. Emma stayed, still holding the note like evidence of a crime. You didn't just fix the variable, she said. You restructured 3 core functions, implemented parallel processing where we had sequential, and somehow made the entire thing faster without changing any outputs. The parallel processing was obvious once I saw how you'd structured the data flow. It wasn't obvious to me. It wasn't obvious to anyone on my team. We've been staring at this code for weeks. Emma moved closer to his desk, her expression caught between awe and something that looked like frustration. How did you see it in one night? Fresh eyes and experience. I've been writing code since I was 14, Emma. Eventually you develop pattern recognition. You don't have time for this. You're running a billion-dollar company. 3 billion, actually. And I made time because you needed help and I could provide it. That's what we do here, remember? Take care of our people. Emma set the note down carefully. You stayed until 4 a.m. I checked the security logs. Tattletale. Daniel. Her voice softened. Why would you do that? Really? Because watching her work herself into exhaustion made something ache in his chest. Because he remembered being 26 and passionate and terrified of failing, remembered having no one to catch him when he fell. Because she reminded him of who he'd been before the suits and the board meetings and the slow erosion of everything that made him feel alive. Because she mattered, and he was starting to realize how much, and that terrified him more than any board meeting ever could. Because your work matters, he said instead, the safe answer. This rollout could transform the company. I can't have you burning out before we get there. Emma studied him with those sharp eyes that saw too much. Is that the only reason? The question hung between them, dangerous and electric. Daniel should have deflected, made a joke, changed the subject to something safe and professional. Instead, he held her gaze and said quietly, Ask me again when the rollout is finished. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe. Or the first stirrings of understanding. She nodded slowly. Okay, I will. She left and Daniel sat in his office staring at the door long after it closed, wondering when exactly he'd lost his mind. You didn't get involved with employees. You didn't blur professional lines. You definitely didn't spend 4 a.m. optimizing code for someone you were trying very hard not to have feelings for. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria Stern. Coffee tomorrow? Need to discuss board dynamics before the quarterly meeting. Which meant Coleman was making moves again. Daniel typed back. 7 a.m., usual place. The rest of the day was consumed by the usual chaos. Executive decisions, client crises, a conference call with European partners that ran 2 hours longer than scheduled. By the time Daniel looked up, it was 7 p.m. and Liam was calling, asking when Daddy would be home. 20 minutes, buddy. Have you finished your homework? Mostly. Maria helped with the math. Good. I'll check it when I get there. Love you. Love you infinity times infinity. Daniel smiled despite his exhaustion. That's my line. I'm stealing it. It's a good line. 23 minutes later, Daniel walked through his apartment door to find Liam building an elaborate structure out of blocks, and Maria watching with the patient expression of someone who'd refereed many architectural disasters. Mr. Cross, she greeted. He's been very good. Homework is done, dinner is ready, and he only asked about dessert 4 times. 5, Liam corrected. You weren't counting when I asked in Spanish. Maria laughed. Clever boy. Too clever. Daniel thanked her, saw her out, then turned to survey his son's construction project. What are we building? Your office. See, this is the big window where you look at the city, and this is your desk, and these are all the people who work for you. Liam had arranged smaller blocks around the desk block in what Daniel assumed was meant to be an organizational chart. And this is you, working so hard because everyone needs you. Something caught in Daniel's throat. That's very accurate, buddy. I know. I'm good at noticing things. Liam looked up with those serious brown eyes. Daddy, do you like working so much? Dangerous question. Honest answer or comfortable lie? Daniel sat down on the floor next to his son. I like building things, like you're building right now. The company is like a really big, complicated block tower, and my job is making sure it doesn't fall down. But you're tired all the time. Sometimes building important things makes you tired. Is it more important than me? And there it was, the question that haunted Daniel at 3 a.m. when he couldn't sleep. The fear that he was failing the one person who mattered most. No, he said firmly, pulling Liam into his lap. Nothing is more important than you. Not the company, not work, nothing. You're the most important thing in my whole world. Then why do you have to work so much? Because the work I do helps a lot of people. Thousands of people who work for the company, millions of people who use what we build, and because the work lets me take care of you, make sure you have everything you need. Daniel paused. But buddy, if the work ever gets in the way of being your dad, you tell me, okay? You're the boss of me, not the other way around. Liam giggled. Really? Really? You outrank everyone, even the board of directors. What's a board of directors? Exactly. Daniel kissed the top of Liam's head. Come on, let's have dinner. Then you can tell me about your day. They ate together, Liam chattering about school and friends and the science project that was definitely going to win first place because volcanoes were the coolest thing ever. Daniel listened, asked questions, tried to be present instead of mentally reviewing the presentation he needed to prepare for tomorrow. After dinner, after homework review, after bath time and story time and the elaborate bedtime ritual that Liam had somehow extended to 45 minutes, Daniel stood in the doorway watching his son sleep and felt the familiar weight settle over him. He was failing. Maybe not catastrophically, maybe not in ways anyone else could see, but in the quiet moments he knew the truth. He was spread too thin, pulled in too many directions, trying to be everything to everyone, and succeeding at being barely enough for anyone. Sarah would have known what to do. She'd always known how to balance everything, how to make it look effortless. She'd been the steady center that held their world together, and when she died, that center had collapsed. Daniel had spent 2 years trying to rebuild it alone. Most days, he wasn't sure he was succeeding. His phone buzzed, an email from Emma, time-stamped 11:42 p.m. Found another bottleneck in the load balancing. Fixed it using the parallel processing approach you showed me. Tests running now. Thank you for teaching me to see the patterns. E. Daniel read it twice, then typed back. That's exactly what I hoped you'd do. Take the concept and run with it. Go to sleep, Emma. The tests will be there in the morning. Her response came immediately. You're emailing at midnight. Don't think I don't notice the hypocrisy. He smiled despite himself. Fair point. Going to sleep now. You should too. Deal. Good night, Daniel. Good night. Daniel set down his phone and realized he was still smiling. When had that started happening? When had emails from Emma become the highlight of his day? When had her successes started feeling like his own? When had he started looking for excuses to stop by her lab or extend conversations beyond what was professionally necessary? Somewhere in the last 6 weeks, Emma Sinclair had become important, not just as an employee or a valuable asset, but as a person he looked forward to seeing, talking to, working alongside. It was dangerous. It was complicated. It violated about 17 different policies he'd implemented to protect the company from exactly this kind of situation, and Daniel couldn't seem to make himself care. The next morning's coffee with Victoria was as unpleasant as expected. She arrived at their usual cafe with a stack of documents and an expression that meant bad news. Coleman is pushing for a vote of no confidence, she said without preamble, sliding a folder across the table. Nothing official yet, but he's been calling board members, building consensus. He thinks you're too risk-averse, too focused on stability instead of growth. Daniel scanned the documents, meeting notes, email chains, the slow accumulation of dissent. When? Next quarterly meeting. He'll frame it as concern for the company's future, suggest that maybe you need a partner in leadership, a co-CEO structure to bring fresh perspective. A co-CEO that he gets to choose. Exactly. Victoria sipped her coffee. He's got 4 solid votes, needs 7 total to force a restructure. He's working on the others. Daniel did the math. 4 votes for Coleman, Victoria, and 3 others firmly in Daniel's corner. That left 4 undecided board members who could swing either way. Recommendations? Win them over. Show them growth without recklessness. Give them something to believe in that isn't Coleman's expansion fantasy. Victoria paused. And Daniel? Whatever you're working on with the data vision integration, accelerate it. Show the board tangible results, proof that your approach works. They respond to success. The rollout is in 12 days. Make it sooner. Victoria, you can't rush technology. I know that, but Coleman doesn't care about technology. He cares about perception. If you can show the board a major win before he forces the vote, you undercut his entire argument. Daniel sat back, his mind already racing through timelines and possibilities. Could they accelerate? Emma's team was running ahead of schedule. The integration tests were solid, Beta clients were eager. If they could move the launch up by even a week. I'll talk to my team, he said. See what's possible. Do more than talk, Daniel. Fight, because Coleman isn't going to stop until he either wins or you destroy him completely. She left him with that cheerful thought. Daniel finished his coffee, returned to the office, and called an emergency meeting with his executive team. By 9 a.m., they were assembled in his office. Marcus Chen, Jennifer Wu from Client Relations, David Park from Operations, and Margaret taking notes with her usual efficient intensity. I need to know if we can move up the data vision rollout, Daniel said without preamble. Best case scenario. How soon? Marcus frowned. We're scheduled for 2 weeks. Moving it up means compressed testing, less time to identify edge cases. I understand the risks. I'm asking if it's possible. Technically, maybe. The integration tests are passing. Beta clients are ready. We'd need Emma's team to work overtime, client relations to accelerate onboarding, operations to prep the infrastructure faster than planned. Marcus looked around the table. It's possible, but it's aggressive. Everything we do is aggressive, Jennifer said. The question is whether it's smart aggressive or desperate aggressive. It's strategic aggressive, Daniel replied. The board is restless. Coleman is making moves. We need a win that demonstrates our approach works. Understanding dawned on their faces. This wasn't just about technology. It was about politics, power, survival. 1 week, David said. We can do 1 week if everyone commits. Infrastructure can be ready in 4 days. But Daniel, if this fails publicly, if we push too hard and something breaks with beta clients watching, I know. We'd hand Coleman everything he needs to force me out. Daniel looked at each of them. I'm not ordering this. I'm asking. If you think it's a mistake, say so now. Silence. Then Marcus spoke carefully. Emma's work is solid. The best I've seen in years. If anyone can handle an accelerated timeline, it's her team. But she'll need support. Resources, flexibility, access to whatever she asks for. Done. Whatever she needs, she gets. Including you, Jennifer asked with a slight smile. Because from what I hear, you've been pretty hands-on with this project already. Daniel ignored the implication. I'll do whatever helps us succeed. Margaret, schedule a meeting with Emma for this afternoon. Everyone else, start acceleration planning. We go in 1 week. They filed out, energized and anxious in equal measure. Daniel returned to his desk and tried to focus on the 17 other things demanding his attention. Instead, he found himself thinking about Emma, about asking her to do the impossible, about whether he was pushing too hard because the company needed it or because he needed to prove something to himself. The meeting at 2 p.m. was just Emma and Daniel in his office, door closed, the city sprawling beneath them through floor-to-ceiling windows. We want to accelerate the rollout, Daniel said. 1 week instead of 2. I know it's asking a lot. We can do it, Emma interrupted immediately. The code is ready, tests are passing, we've been running simulations constantly. 1 week is aggressive but achievable. Daniel blinked. You don't want to think about it? Consult your team? I already have. We were hoping you'd ask. Emma leaned forward, intensity radiating from her. Daniel, this integration is good. Really good. Every day we delay is a day our competitors could catch up. If you're ready to pull the trigger, so are we. It's not just about the technology. There are political implications, board dynamics. If this fails, it won't fail. You can't guarantee that. No, Emma admitted. But I can guarantee that my team and I will do everything in our power to make it succeed. We've been living this code for 2 months. We know every line, every function, every potential failure point. We're ready. Daniel studied her, seeing the confidence but also the awareness of what she was taking on. The board is watching this. If it succeeds, it proves our acquisition strategy works, that investment in innovation beats reckless expansion. If it fails, it gives my opposition everything they need to force me out. Emma's eyes widened slightly. I didn't realize the stakes were that high. They are, which is why I need you to be absolutely certain. This isn't just about technology anymore, it's about the future of the company. She didn't hesitate. Then let's show them what the future looks like. 1 week, Daniel, we'll make it work. Why are you so confident? Because you believed in us when nobody else did. Because you gave us resources and support and actually listened when we said we could do better. Emma's voice softened. Because you stayed until 4 a.m. fixing code you didn't have to fix. Because you care about the work and the people doing it, not just the results. That kind of leadership makes people want to succeed. Not because they have to, but because they don't want to let you down. Something shifted in Daniel's chest, a crack in the armor he'd built so carefully. Emma? 1 week, she repeated firmly. Trust us. Trust me. Daniel made the decision in the space between heartbeats. Okay, 1 week. Whatever you need, you get. Staff, budget, equipment, access. You report directly to me for the duration. Any obstacles, you call me immediately. Even at 4 a.m.? Especially at 4 a.m. We're in this together. Emma smiled, bright and determined. Then let's make history. She left to mobilize her team, and Daniel sat in his office feeling something he hadn't felt in years. The electric anticipation of a calculated risk that could change everything. He'd built his empire on moments like this. Decisions that looked reckless from the outside but were founded on absolute belief in the people executing them. He believed in Emma, trusted her judgment, her skills, her determination. And if he was being honest with himself, he believed in her as more than just a brilliant developer. He believed in who she was, how she approached challenges, the passion she brought to everything she touched. That belief was dangerous, but Daniel was tired of playing it safe. His phone rang. Liam's school, which made his heart jump until the secretary assured him everything was fine. They just needed permission for the upcoming field trip. Permission granted, crisis averted, Daniel returned to work. But part of his attention stayed on the 42nd floor, where Emma was gathering her team, explaining the new timeline, rallying them for 7 days of intensive work that would determine the company's future. And his. The next week was controlled chaos. Emma's team worked around the clock, Daniel cleared obstacles faster than they appeared, and the beta clients were contacted, briefed, and prepared for early deployment. Daniel found himself spending more time on the 42nd floor than in his own office, reviewing code, troubleshooting issues, making decisions in real time instead of through carefully scheduled meetings. It felt like the early days of his company, when he'd worked 90-hour weeks and survived on coffee and determination. It felt like being alive instead of just functional. On day 5, at 2 a.m., he and Emma were alone in the lab debugging a client integration issue that had appeared in testing. They'd been working in comfortable silence for an hour when Emma suddenly spoke. "Can I ask you something personal?" Daniel looked up from his screen. "Depends on how personal." "Why do you do this? Not the company, not the CEO thing. This. Sitting here at 2 a.m. debugging code when you have 1,000 other things you could be doing." Honest question, deserved an honest answer. "Because this is real," Daniel said quietly. "Everything else, the board meetings, the politics, the performance of being Daniel Cross, CEO, it's necessary, but it's not real. This is actual problem solving, concrete challenges with definitive solutions. It reminds me why I started the company in the first place." Which was? To build something that mattered, to prove that a kid from Queens with more ambition than sense could create something extraordinary. He paused. And because coding was the only thing that made sense after my wife died. Emma's expression softened. "I didn't know you were married." "She passed away 2 years ago. Aneurysm. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. Just there one moment and gone the next." Daniel was surprised by how easily the words came. He never talked about Sarah, not to anyone except Liam. She was the steady one, the one who made everything feel manageable. When she died, I threw myself into work because it was the only thing I could control. "And your son?" "Liam is Xian. He's brilliant and funny, and sometimes I look at him and I can't breathe because he looks so much like her." Daniel smiled sadly. "He's the reason I keep building. The reason I fight Coleman and the board and everyone who thinks they know better. Because I want to leave him something more than money. I want to leave him proof that you can build something meaningful from nothing." Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she said softly, "He's lucky to have you." "I'm not sure about that. Most days I feel like I'm failing him, missing games, working late, asking Maria to cover because I have another crisis to manage." "But you're here. You show up. You're trying. That counts for something." "Does it?" "My father left when I was 8, Emma said. Just walked out one day and never came back. You want to know what I remember most? Not the leaving, the absence. All the moments he wasn't there, all the promises he didn't keep. You're there, Daniel. Even when you're physically absent, you're there for Liam. He knows you love him. That's what matters. Daniel felt something ease in his chest, a knot of guilt loosening fractionally. Thank you. For what? For understanding and for listening. I don't usually... He trailed off. Talk to people, I've noticed. You're very good at being the CEO everyone else needs, and very bad at being a human who needs things too. Occupational hazard. Or a choice. Emma turned to face him fully. You asked me to ask you again after the rollout, about why you helped me that night. The rollout isn't finished. Close enough. So I'm asking, was it really just because the work mattered? Daniel could lie, should lie, protect them both from the complication of honesty. Instead, he said quietly, no. It was because watching you work yourself to exhaustion reminded me of myself at your age. Because you care about the work the way I used to before it became just another responsibility. Because somewhere along the way, you became someone I enjoy working with, talking to, being around. And that scared me enough that I told myself it was just about the project. And now? Now I'm realizing I'm not very good at lying to myself. The air between them changed, charged with acknowledgement of something that had been building for weeks. Emma held his gaze, and Daniel saw his own uncertainty reflected back at him. This is complicated, she said. Extremely. You're my boss. I'm aware. There are policies, rules against exactly this kind of thing. I wrote most of them. Emma laughed softly. So what do? We finish the rollout, Daniel said. We prove that the work was worth the risk, and then we figure out the rest. That's very CEO of you, prioritizing the work. Would you prefer something different? She considered. No, actually that's exactly what I'd do too. The work comes first, always. See? We're compatible, or equally dysfunctional. That too. They returned to debugging, but something had shifted. The silence wasn't just comfortable anymore. It was intimate, full of things acknowledged but not yet fully explored. Daniel found himself acutely aware of Emma beside him, the quiet sounds of her typing, the small crease between her eyebrows when she concentrated, the way she absently twisted a strand of hair when thinking through a problem. He was in trouble. Deep, complicated, probably catastrophic trouble. And for the first time in 2 years, he didn't entirely mind. The integration issue was resolved by 3:30 a.m. They ran final tests, confirmed everything was stable, and finally admitted that sleep might be necessary. Go home, Daniel said. Few hours before everything starts again. You too, Emma replied. Liam will want breakfast. The fact that she remembered, that she thought about his son, made something warm bloom in Daniel's chest. Pancakes. It's always pancakes. Infinity times infinity pancakes? He blinked. How do you know about that? You mentioned it once. In a meeting. Someone asked how committed you were to the project, and you said infinity times infinity. It stuck. Daniel felt exposed and understood in equal measure. It's what Sarah used to say. Liam inherited it. It's beautiful. It's everything. Emma smiled. Then go make pancakes, Daniel. The code will keep until morning. They left together, took the elevator down to the empty lobby, walked out into the pre-dawn Manhattan streets, where garbage trucks rumbled and early shift workers hurried past. Daniel's car was waiting. Emma's subway stop was 2 blocks away. Thank you, she said, for tonight, for trusting me with this project, for all of it. Thank you for making me remember why I loved this work in the first place. She nodded, started to turn away, then stopped. Daniel? 2 more days. Then we make history. 2 more days, he agreed. He watched her walk toward the subway, her figure disappearing into the dawn, and felt the weight of what they'd acknowledged settling over him like a blanket, warm and terrifying in equal measure. 2 days until the rollout. 2 days until they proved Coleman wrong, secured the company's future, and changed everything. 2 days until Daniel had to figure out what came next. He got in the car and headed home to make pancakes for his son, carrying the secret of Emma Sinclair in his chest like a promise he wasn't ready to keep, but couldn't bear to break. The pancakes were slightly burned because Daniel kept replaying Emma's words in his head instead of watching the griddle, but Liam didn't seem to notice. He drowned them in syrup and chattered about the field trip permission slip while Daniel tried to focus on being present instead of thinking about dawn conversations and 2 a.m. confessions. "Daddy, you're not listening." Daniel blinked. "I am. The Natural History Museum. You want to see the dinosaurs." "That was 5 minutes ago. Now I'm talking about Marcus inviting me to his birthday party on Saturday." Liam studied him with those 2 perceptive eyes. "Are you okay? You look sad." "Not sad, buddy, just tired." "You're always tired." "I know. I'm working on that." "Maybe you should take a nap like I have to when I'm tired." Daniel smiled despite himself. "That's good advice. I'll try to follow it." He dropped Liam at school, fielded 3 crisis calls before 9 a.m., and arrived at the office to find Margaret waiting with an expression that meant something significant had happened. "Coleman called an emergency board session for this afternoon," she said without preamble. "He's pushing the no-confidence vote early. Says waiting for the quarterly meeting is irresponsible given the company's direction." Daniel's stomach dropped. "We deploy tomorrow. He knows that." "Which is exactly why he's doing it today. If the vote happens before the rollout, he doesn't have to contend with your success." Margaret's voice was tight with anger. "It's a calculated move, Daniel. Dirty politics." "Can he do that? Call a session with less than 24 hours' notice?" "Technically, yes, if he can prove urgency. He's claiming fiduciary responsibility, concern about missed opportunities, the usual corporate governance rhetoric." She paused. "He has 6 votes confirmed. He needs 7. 7 votes. The exact number required to force a restructure to install a co-CEO of Coleman's choosing to effectively strip Daniel of the control he'd built his entire adult life maintaining. "Who's the swing vote?" "Thomas Wright. He's been fence-sitting for weeks. Coleman's been courting him hard. But Thomas respects you. It could go either way." Daniel checked his watch. 11 hours until the board session. 29 hours until the rollout that would prove his entire strategic approach. The timing was deliberate and vicious. "Schedule a call with Thomas. Now, if possible." "Already done. He can talk at 10. This was why Margaret was irreplaceable. She anticipated disasters and had solutions ready before Daniel asked. The call with Thomas Wright was delicate and frustrating. He was concerned about growth trajectories, worried about the company's conservative approach, uncertain whether Daniel's vision still aligned with shareholder interests. All valid concerns wrapped in the careful language of someone who didn't want to commit. "Thomas," Daniel said finally, abandoning diplomatic hedging, "I've known you for 8 years. You were one of my first investors. You believed in this company when it was just me and a prototype. So I'm going to be direct. Are you really questioning my judgment, or are you questioning whether I still have the hunger to lead?" Silence on the other end. Then, "Maybe both." "Fair enough. Let me ask you something. When you invested, what did you see? What made you write that first check?" "Vision, execution. Someone who saw problems nobody else saw and had the technical chops to solve them." "That hasn't changed. The data vision integration we're launching tomorrow is exactly that kind of solution. 43% improvement in processing speed, 62% reduction in server load, seamless deployment. It's going to change the entire competitive landscape." "Tomorrow, after Coleman forces the vote today." "Yes." Convenient timing on his part. Daniel leaned back in his chair, watching the city move beneath him. "Thomas, you're a smart man. You know what's happening here. Coleman wants power, not results. He's pushing this vote now specifically because he's afraid of what happens if we succeed. If you vote with him, you're not voting for the company's future. You're voting for politics over performance." "That's a harsh assessment. It's an accurate one, and you know it." Another silence, longer this time. "The board session is at 4. I'll make my decision based on what I hear there." It wasn't a commitment, but it wasn't a rejection either. Daniel would take what he could get. The call ended. Daniel sat motionless, running scenarios, calculating possibilities. Even if Thomas voted in his favor, that was only 6 votes to Coleman's 6. A tie, which meant nothing changed but also meant Coleman would keep pushing keep building coalition, keep eroding Daniel's authority until he finally got the votes he needed. Daniel needed more than a tie. He needed a decisive win that shut down Coleman's insurgency completely. His phone buzzed. Emma. Final integration tests complete. All systems green. We're ready for tomorrow. How are you doing? He stared at the message, at her casual concern, at the way she asked about him instead of just the project. When was the last time someone had asked how he was doing and actually wanted to know the answer? He typed back, Board crisis. Coleman is forcing an early vote. 4 p.m. today. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, before our rollout? That's deliberate sabotage. Yes. What do you need? The question caught him off guard. Not what can I do, not how can I help with the project, but what do you need? Personal, direct, offering support without conditions. Daniel realized he didn't know how to answer. He'd spent so long being the person everyone else needed that he'd forgotten how to articulate his own needs. I need tomorrow to come faster, he typed. I need Coleman to spontaneously develop ethics. I need a clone so I can be in 2 places at once. I can't help with the first 2, but I'm pretty good at being in multiple places. What can I actually do? Daniel considered. The board responds to results. If I could show them concrete evidence of the integration's potential before the vote. Done. Give me 2 hours. I'll prepare a presentation showing current test results, projected impact, client testimonials from beta testing, hard data that proves your strategy works. Emma, you're supposed to be prepping for tomorrow's deployment. This is prepping for tomorrow. If Coleman forces you out today, there is no tomorrow. We need you leading this company, Daniel. So I'm going to make sure the board sees exactly what they'd be throwing away. The fierce loyalty in her words made something tighten in Daniel's chest. Thank you. Thank me by winning. 2 hours. I'll send you everything you need to destroy Coleman's argument. She disconnected, and Daniel felt a surge of something he'd almost forgotten. Hope mixed with gratitude, the knowledge that he wasn't fighting alone. He spent the next 2 hours in strategy sessions with his executive team, preparing counterarguments, reviewing financials, building the case for why steady growth beat reckless expansion. Marcus brought data on competitor failures. Jennifer compiled client satisfaction metrics. David pulled infrastructure efficiency reports. At noon, Emma's presentation arrived. It was perfect, clear, compelling, packed with evidence that the data vision integration represented exactly the kind of innovation the company needed. Test results, performance metrics, projected revenue impact, and at the end, a single slide that simply read, "This is what leadership looks like. Vision plus execution equals results." Daniel stared at that slide for a long moment, feeling the weight of everything riding on the next 4 hours. His phone rang. Liam's school again, and this time Daniel's heart actually stopped until the nurse explained it was just a routine medication reminder. Nothing urgent. "Mr. Cross, are you all right? You sound stressed." "Big day at work. I'm fine." "Well, Liam wanted me to tell you he loves you and he drew you a picture of a superhero. He says it's you because you save people." Daniel closed his eyes against the sudden burn. "Tell him I love him too. Infinity times infinity." "I will. He's a special boy. You're doing a good job with him." The reassurance shouldn't have mattered so much. It did anyway. At 3:45, Daniel walked into the boardroom wearing his armor. The Tom Ford suit, the Patek Philippe watch, the expression of calm certainty that he'd perfected over years of high-stakes negotiations. Inside, his heart hammered against his ribs. Outside, he was perfectly composed. The board members were already assembled, conversations dying as Daniel entered. Coleman sat at the opposite end of the table looking satisfied and predatory. Victoria caught Daniel's eye, gave the slightest nod of support. Thomas Wright looked conflicted. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Coleman began, his voice carrying false concern. "I know this is unusual, but given the critical juncture the company faces, I felt we couldn't wait for the quarterly meeting to address some fundamental concerns about our leadership direction." Daniel let him talk, let him lay out his case about missed opportunities and conservative strategies and the need for fresh perspective. Coleman was good at this, painting concern as care, ambition as altruism. He had clearly rehearsed, hitting all the right notes about shareholder value and fiduciary responsibility. When Coleman finally finished, silence settled over the room. "Daniel," Victoria prompted, "would you like to respond?" "I would." Daniel stood, moving to the presentation screen, connecting his laptop with practiced ease. Richard raises valid questions about growth and opportunity. He's right that the company faces critical decisions about our future direction. Where he's wrong is in his assessment of our current strategy. He pulled up Emma's presentation, started with the metrics, the hard data that couldn't be argued with. Revenue growth, client retention, market share expansion. Not explosive, but steady and sustainable. "This is what we've built," Daniel said. "Consistent, reliable growth based on delivering exceptional value to our clients. Not flashy, not headline-grabbing, but real." "No, exactly the problem," Coleman interrupted. "While we're being consistent, our competitors are being aggressive. We're losing ground." "Are we?" Daniel advanced to the next slide. Competitor analysis showing failed expansions, overextended resources, declining client satisfaction. Being aggressive without strategy is just being reckless. 3 of our major competitors attempted rapid international expansion in the last 18 months. All 3 are now facing severe financial difficulties. That could have been us if we'd followed Richard's advice. He saw several board members shift, reconsidering. "But you haven't just come here to defend the past," Daniel continued. "You want to know about the future, fair enough? Let me show you." He pulled up Emma's integration data. The room went silent as the numbers appeared. 43% processing improvement, 62% server load reduction, projected revenue impact in the tens of millions. "This is the data vision integration launching tomorrow," Daniel said. "This is what strategic acquisition looks like. We identified a brilliant team with revolutionary technology, brought them into our ecosystem, and gave them the resources to do what they do best. The result is technology that will fundamentally change our competitive position." "Tomorrow," Coleman interjected. "Very convenient that this miracle solution launches right after today's vote." "The timing is only convenient for you, Richard. We've been building toward this for months. You knew the timeline. You chose to force this vote now specifically to avoid having to contend with our success." Thomas Wright spoke up, his voice thoughtful. "These numbers are impressive, Daniel, but they're projections. How do we know the integration will actually perform as advertised?" "Fair question." Daniel respected him for asking it. "We don't, not with absolute certainty. Technology always carries risk." But Daniel advanced to the beta testing results. "But we have data from controlled deployment, real clients, real usage, real results. Every metric exceeds projections. The technology works. The question isn't whether it will succeed, it's whether you trust the leadership that made it possible." He let that hang in the air, then pulled up the final slide. Emma's words stared back at the board. This is what leadership looks like. Vision plus execution equals results. "I've spent 12 years building this company," Daniel said quietly. 12 years of calculated risks, strategic decisions, and absolute commitment to doing things right instead of doing things fast. I'm not afraid of growth. I'm afraid of stupidity. I won't gamble with this company's future just to satisfy someone's need to feel important. He looked directly at Coleman. "You want to force a restructure? Fine. Call the vote. But understand what you're actually voting for. You're choosing politics over performance, ego over evidence, fear over facts. If that's what you want for this company, then maybe I'm not the right person to lead it anymore." The room was completely silent. Daniel could feel the weight of 12 years, of everything he'd built, everything he'd sacrificed, balanced on this moment. "I'd like to call for a 15-minute recess," Thomas Wright said suddenly. "I think we all need to consider what we've heard." Victoria nodded immediately. "Seconded." The board filed out in small clusters, murmuring to each other. Daniel stayed in the boardroom, staring at the presentation screen, trying to quiet the chaos in his head. Victoria approached. "That was good, really good. But Daniel, you practically dared them to vote against you." "I'm tired of playing defense. Either they believe in what we're doing or they don't." "Very noble, also potentially suicidal." "Probably." Daniel smiled grimly. "But I meant what I said. If they want Coleman's vision more than mine, they should have it. I'm not interested in leading a company where I have to constantly justify doing things correctly. And if you lose, then I lose. I'll still have Liam. I'll still have my integrity. I'll survive. Victoria studied him with something like respect. You've changed. 2 years ago, losing this company would have destroyed you. 2 years ago, I hadn't lost everything that actually mattered. Daniel thought about Sarah, about learning that nothing in the boardroom could hurt him as much as losing her had. The company is important. It's not everything. Well, let's hope the board agrees with your approach, because I'd hate to see Coleman drive this place into the ground. The 15 minutes stretched to 25. When the board reconvened, Daniel couldn't read the room. Faces were carefully neutral, giving nothing away. We've discussed the situation, Thomas Wright said, and we'd like to hear from Richard before we vote. Coleman stood, and Daniel braced for whatever new argument he'd prepared during the recess. I withdraw my motion for restructure, Coleman said flatly. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Daniel kept his expression neutral, but inside shock rippled through him. You what? Victoria said, unable to hide her disbelief. I withdraw the motion. After reviewing the data Daniel presented and considering the integration launch tomorrow, I believe we should table this discussion until after we see the actual results. Coleman's smile was tight. I'm not withdrawing my concerns, but I'm willing to wait for evidence. It was a retreat disguised as reasonableness, and everyone in the room knew it. Coleman had counted votes during the recess and realized he didn't have 7. Rather than lose publicly, he was spinning the withdrawal as strategic patience. Daniel almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Very well, Victoria said smoothly. Without a motion on the floor, this session is adjourned. Daniel, we'll expect a full report on the integration results at the quarterly meeting. Of course. The board filed out. Coleman left quickly, avoiding eye contact. Thomas Wright paused by Daniel's chair. That was a close thing, he said quietly. You had 6 votes, including mine. Coleman had 5 and 1 abstention. He knew he'd lost. Thank you, Thomas, for trusting the strategy. Don't thank me yet. Prove it tomorrow. Show me this integration is everything you promised. I will. Wright left, and Daniel was alone in the boardroom, adrenaline still coursing through his veins, hardly believing he'd survived. Not won, exactly. Coleman would be back, would keep pushing, but survived. Bought time. His phone buzzed. Emma, well? Daniel typed back. No vote? Coleman withdrew. We're clear to launch tomorrow. Daniel, that's amazing. We're celebrating tonight. The team wants to buy you drinks. He smiled at his phone. I have to get Liam from school. Rain check? Tomorrow night then. After we change the world. Deal. Daniel gathered his things, left the office, and made it to Liam's school 10 minutes early for the first time in months. He stood outside the building watching kids pour out, and when Liam spotted him, his son's face lit up like sunrise. Daddy, you're here! You're actually here! Daniel caught him in a hug, lifted him up despite the fact that Liam was getting too big for this, held on a little longer than necessary. I'm here, buddy. I promised I would be. Did you save people today? Like a superhero? Daniel thought about board votes and presentations and Emma's fierce loyalty. I tried. Mostly I just did my job. That's what superheroes do. They just do their job saving people. Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds. Daniel kissed the top of Liam's head. Come on, let's go home. No work tonight. Just us. Really? You promise? I promise. Infinity times infinity. They went home. Daniel kept his phone off, ignored emails, and spent the evening building Lego structures and playing board games and being present in a way he hadn't managed in weeks. When Liam finally fell asleep, Daniel stood in the doorway, as always, watching his son dream, feeling the weight of the day settle into something manageable. He'd survived. Tomorrow, he'd either succeed or fail spectacularly. But tonight, he was just a father watching his son sleep, and that was enough. His phone buzzed with a single message from Emma. Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for believing in us. In me. It matters more than you know. Daniel stared at the words for a long time before typing back, Thank you for reminding me why I built this company. for making me care again. That matters more than you know, too." He hit send before he could overthink it, then turned off his phone and went to bed. Tomorrow would come soon enough. The launch day arrived with the kind of crystalline autumn morning that made everything feel possible. Daniel was at the office by 6 a.m., running final checks, reviewing protocols, making sure every piece was in place. The beta clients would begin deployment at 9. By noon, they'd have preliminary data. By end of day, they'd know if Emma's integration lived up to its promise. Emma and her team had been there all night. Daniel found them in the war room they'd set up on the 42nd floor, surrounded by monitors showing system status, client feeds, real-time analytics. They looked exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. "Status?" Daniel asked. "Green across the board," Emma reported, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "All clients confirmed ready. Integration packages deployed. We're just waiting for go time." Daniel checked his watch. 2 hours and 43 minutes. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified, excited, possibly hallucinating from caffeine overdose." Emma smiled shakily. "This is it. Everything we've worked for." "You've done extraordinary work, all of you." Daniel addressed the whole team. "Whatever happens today, you should be proud. This integration is revolutionary. The results will speak for themselves." At 9 a.m. exactly, Emma initiated the deployment sequence. Daniel watched the monitors as the integration packages activated across beta client systems, data beginning to flow through the new architecture, processing speeds ramping up exactly as projected. For 10 minutes, everything was perfect. Then one of the monitors flashed red. "What is that?" Daniel asked, moving closer. "Client 7. They're showing integration conflicts with their legacy security protocols." Emma was already typing furiously. "The handshake is failing. It's routing through the old system instead of the new architecture. Can you fix it remotely?" "Working on it, but if we can't..." She didn't finish. They both knew what it meant. One failed deployment in a public beta test would give Coleman all the ammunition he needed. The team swarmed the problem, pulling up logs, analyzing error messages, testing solutions. Daniel stood back, letting them work, trusting their expertise. This was what leadership looked like, knowing when to step in and when to trust your people. 15 minutes passed. 20. The other client deployments were succeeding beautifully, metrics exceeding projections. But Client 7 remained stubbornly red. "It's a configuration issue," Emma said finally. "Their security certificates are using an outdated encryption standard. Our integration assumes modern protocols. We either need to patch their system or create a compatibility layer in our code." "How long for each option?" "Patching their system, 2 hours minimum, requires their IT approval. Building compatibility, 4 hours of coding, but we control it completely." Daniel made the decision instantly. "Build the compatibility layer. We can't wait on their approval process." Emma nodded and turned to her team. "Jake, Sarah, you're with me. We're building a legacy security bridge. Everyone else, monitor the successful deployments and start gathering performance data." They dove into the code. Daniel stayed, watching them work, occasionally fielding updates from Margaret about board members asking for status reports, clients wanting confirmation, executives hovering anxiously. By 1 p.m., the compatibility layer was built and testing. By 2, it was deployed. By 2:30, Client 7's status switched from red to yellow to green. The room erupted in cheers. "All systems operational," Emma announced, her voice breaking slightly. "Integration complete across all beta clients. Performance metrics exceeding projections by an average of 12%. But Daniel felt something uncurl in his chest. Relief mixed with pride, vindication wrapped in gratitude. They'd done it. Against timeline pressure and board politics and technical challenges, they'd actually done it. He caught Emma's eye across the room, saw his own emotion reflected back at him. She looked ready to cry or laugh or collapse, possibly all three. "You did it," he said quietly, moving to stand beside her at the main monitor. "We did it," she corrected. "This was a team effort, led by someone extraordinary." Emma turned to face him fully, and for just a moment the rest of the room faded away. "Daniel..." "Mr. Cross," Margaret's voice from the doorway. "The board is requesting an immediate status briefing. Coleman wants details on the deployment results. The moment broke. Daniel stepped back, rebuilding professional distance. Tell them I'll send a comprehensive report within the hour. Full metrics, client feedback, performance analysis. Margaret nodded and disappeared. Emma was already turning back to her team, marshaling them to compile the data Daniel would need. The celebration was brief. There was still work to do, reports to generate, success to document, but they'd succeeded. That was real and undeniable. The next 3 hours were consumed by documentation, client calls, board communications. Daniel sent the promised report at 5 p.m., knowing Coleman would scrutinize every word, looking for weakness and finding none. The data was irrefutable. The integration worked. The strategy was validated. At 6 p.m., Margaret appeared with champagne and glasses. The board sent this. Victoria says to enjoy the victory because Coleman will be regrouping. She's not wrong. Daniel accepted a glass. But for tonight, we won. That's enough. The executive team gathered in Daniel's office, toasting the success, rehashing the morning's crisis, laughing with the particular relief of people who'd survived something intense together. Emma's entire team was invited up, and they filled the space with chaotic celebration, the kind of joy that came from doing something genuinely difficult and succeeding. Daniel stood by the windows watching them, feeling like an observer at his own party. He was happy, genuinely happy about the success. But there was something hollow underneath, a loneliness that success couldn't quite fill. Emma found him there. "You okay? You look contemplative." "Just thinking." "About?" "What comes next?" Daniel turned to face her. "We succeeded, proved the strategy works, bought ourselves time before Coleman regroups, but it doesn't actually solve the fundamental problem. Which is? I'm still doing this alone, building a company, raising a son, fighting battles on every front. Today was a win. Tomorrow there will be another crisis, another challenge, another thing that demands everything I have." He paused. "I'm tired, Emma. Not of the work, of the isolation." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, "You know you don't have to be alone, right? You've built an entire company of people who would follow you anywhere. You have a team that believes in you, friends who support you." "I know, and I'm grateful." Daniel met her eyes. "But that's not the kind of alone I'm talking about." Understanding dawned on her face, followed by something that looked like pain. "Daniel, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I'm just being honest. You asked me to be after the rollout, so I am. You make me feel less alone. These last 2 months, working with you, talking to you, building something together, it's reminded me what connection feels like. And now that I remember, the absence of it is harder to ignore." "I feel it too," Emma said quietly. "The connection. The way working with you is different from working with anyone else. But Daniel, you're right that this is complicated. You're my boss. There are power dynamics, professional ethics, policies we'd both be violating." "I know. And there's also," she hesitated, "I've been offered a position in Seattle, lead architect role at a major firm. They've been recruiting me for weeks. I've been putting off deciding because of the rollout, but now..." Daniel felt something drop in his stomach. "That's an incredible opportunity." "It is. Career-defining. Everything I've worked toward. You should take it." Emma's eyes widened. "What?" "You should take it," Daniel repeated, forcing the words past the tightness in his throat. "It's the right move for your career. You can't pass that up, especially not for complications here." "You're telling me to leave?" "I'm telling you to make the decision that's best for you, not the one that's easiest for me." Daniel managed a smile. "I meant what I said about leadership. It's caring about people and not being too proud to admit what you need. What you need is that opportunity. What I need, well, that's not your responsibility." "That's very noble and also completely heartbreaking," Emma said, her voice thick. "What if I don't want noble? What if I want honest?" "Honest is that you're brilliant and talented, and you deserve every opportunity the world can give you. Honest is that I care about you too much to ask you to stay for the wrong reasons." Daniel looked away, unable to maintain eye contact. "Honest is that saying this is killing me, but it's the right thing to do." The celebration continued behind them, people laughing and toasting and celebrating the victory neither of them could fully enjoy anymore. "When do they need your answer?" Daniel asked. 2 weeks. "Then take 2 weeks. Think about it without pressure. And Emma, whatever you decide, it won't change what you've built here. The work stands on its own. So does your reputation." "And us? What we talked about?" Daniel was saved from answering by Liam's voice calling from the office doorway. Maria stood there apologetically, Liam bouncing with excitement. "Daddy, Maria said you had a big success today, and I could come congratulate you." Daniel's entire demeanor shifted instantly, turning toward his son with genuine joy. "Buddy, come here!" Liam ran across the office and launched himself at Daniel, who caught him and spun him around. "We did it! The project worked, just like I told you it would." "That's because you're the smartest daddy ever." Liam hugged him tight, then noticed Emma standing nearby. "Hi. Are you one of the people my daddy works with?" Emma smiled despite the emotion in her eyes. "I am. I'm Emma. Your dad has told me a lot about you." "Really? Good things?" "The best things. He says you're his favorite person in the whole world." "That's true." "I am." Liam looked between them with curious eyes. "Did you help my daddy with the project?" "We helped each other," Emma said softly. "That's what good teams do." Liam nodded seriously, then turned back to Daniel. "Can we go get ice cream to celebrate? To celebrate your success and my spelling test where I got all the words right." "Absolutely. Let me just finish up here." Daniel set Liam down, ruffled his hair. "Go tell Maria we'll leave in 10 minutes. Liam ran off, and Daniel turned back to Emma. The vulnerability was still there in her face, the weight of everything unsaid between them. "He's wonderful," she said. "You're a good father, Daniel." "I try." "You succeed. That matters." Emma took a breath. "I should go. Let you celebrate with Liam. He deserves your full attention tonight." "Emma, 2 weeks. I'll think about it. All of it." She smiled sadly. "Thank you for being honest, for caring enough to let go." She left before Daniel could respond, disappearing into the celebration that had somehow become bittersweet. Daniel stood there feeling victory and loss tangled together, unable to separate them. Margaret approached quietly. "The board wants a full presentation next week. Detailed breakdown of the integration results, projected revenue impact, strategic recommendations." "Of course they do." Daniel pulled himself together, rebuilding the professional mask. "Schedule it. I'll prepare something comprehensive." "Daniel?" Margaret's voice was gentle. "You should celebrate tonight. You earned this win." "I know. I will." He looked toward where Liam was chattering excitedly to Maria, with the person who matters most. He collected his son, said his goodbyes to the celebrating team, and left the office carrying the weight of success that felt incomplete. They got ice cream. Liam talked about spelling tests and recess and his friend's upcoming birthday party. Daniel listened, responded, tried to be present, but part of him stayed in that office with Emma, replaying the conversation, questioning whether he'd made the right call telling her to take the Seattle position. Probably not. But it was the right thing to do, which was different from the right call for himself. That night, after Liam was asleep, Daniel stood at his apartment window staring at the city lights and let himself feel everything he'd been holding back. The loneliness, the longing, the particular ache of pushing away something he wanted because it was the right thing for someone else. His phone buzzed. A message from Emma. "Thank you for tonight, for being who you are, for teaching me that leadership means caring more about people than outcomes. I won't forget that. Or you." Daniel read it 3 times, then typed back, "Whatever you decide, I meant what I said. You're extraordinary, Emma. Never doubt that." He hit send, then added, "And for what it's worth, you taught me something too. You reminded me that connection matters, that work can be joyful instead of just necessary. Thank you for that gift." Her response came quickly. "That's worth everything. Good night, Daniel." "Good night." He set down his phone and returned to the window, to the city that had been his home for 20 years, to the life he'd built from nothing and defended fiercely, and now held on to with hands that felt increasingly empty. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. consolidating the integration success, building on the momentum, proving to the board that his strategy was viable long-term. Coleman would regroup, find new angles of attack, keep pushing until he either won or destroyed himself trying. And somewhere in Seattle, a company was waiting for Emma's answer, offering her everything she'd worked for, everything she deserved. Daniel hoped she'd take it, hoped she'd build something extraordinary, hoped that whatever they'd started to build together wouldn't leave too much scar tissue when it ended. He hoped for a lot of things that night. Most of them, he knew, wouldn't come true. But he'd survived worse. He'd keep surviving. For Liam, for the company, for the promise he'd made to himself to never stop building, even when the cost of building felt like it might break him. That's what leaders did, after all. They endured. The enduring lasted exactly 6 days before it became unbearable. Daniel threw himself into work with the kind of intensity that made even Margaret concerned. He prepared the board presentation, analyzed integration metrics, met with clients celebrating their performance improvements. The success was quantifiable and significant. 23% revenue increase projected for Q4. Client satisfaction scores at all-time highs. 3 major competitors already scrambling to replicate what Cross Technologies had achieved. Coleman was silent, regrouping as Victoria had predicted. The board was satisfied for now. The company was thriving. Daniel felt hollow. He saw Emma in meetings, exchanged professional emails about deployment expansion, maintained careful distance. She was polite and brilliant and increasingly distant herself. The 2-week deadline on her Seattle decision was approaching, and Daniel could see the answer forming in the careful way she avoided his eyes. She was going to leave. It was the right decision. He told her to make it. That didn't make it hurt less. On the 6th day, Liam asked the question that broke through Daniel's carefully maintained composure. They were having dinner, take-out Chinese because Daniel had forgotten to plan anything else, when Liam set down his chopsticks and looked at his father with those 2 perceptive eyes. "Daddy, are you sad about something?" Daniel forced a smile. "No, buddy, just tired from work." "You're always tired from work. This is different." Liam tilted his head, studying Daniel the way he studied puzzles he was trying to solve. "You look the way you looked after Mommy died. Like you're here, but not really here." The observation hit like a physical blow. Daniel set down his own chopsticks, struggling for words that wouldn't lie, but wouldn't burden a 7-year-old with adult complications. "I'm okay, Liam. I promise. Sometimes adults have to make hard decisions, and it makes them a little sad even when they know they did the right thing." "What decision?" "There's someone at work who's really talented and got offered an amazing job somewhere else. I told her she should take it because it's the best thing for her career. But I'm going to miss working with her." Liam considered this. "Do you like her?" "Yeah, buddy, I like her a lot." "Like the way you liked Mommy?" Daniel's breath caught. They'd never had this conversation, never approached the topic of Daniel possibly caring about someone new. He'd assumed it would be years before it became relevant. "Different from how I loved Mommy," Daniel said carefully. "But yeah, I care about her in a way that's more than just work." "Then why would you tell her to leave? That doesn't make sense." "Because sometimes when you care about someone, you want what's best for them, even if it's not what's best for you." Liam frowned, clearly unconvinced by this adult logic. "That's dumb." "Liam, it is. If you like her, and she likes you, you should tell her. Maybe she doesn't want to go to the other job. Maybe she wants to stay here with you." He picked up his chopsticks again. "You're always telling me to use my words and be honest about my feelings. You should do that too." Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds. Daniel felt something crack in his chest, the careful rationalization he'd built crumbling under the simple clarity of his son's observation. "What if she leaves anyway?" Daniel asked quietly. "What if I tell her how I feel and she still chooses the other job?" "Then at least you were brave and honest. That's what Mommy would say." Liam's voice was matter of fact. "She always said being brave was doing the thing that scared you, even when you didn't know how it would turn out." Daniel closed his eyes against the sudden overwhelming emotion. Sarah had said exactly that, countless times. "Be brave, Daniel. Take the risk. The only failure is not trying." "You're right," he said finally. "You're absolutely right. When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just don't always listen. Liam grinned. Are you going to tell her? Yeah, buddy, I think I am. Good. Because you've been really sad and I don't like it when you're sad. You should be happy. Mommy would want you to be happy. Daniel pulled Liam into a hug, holding tight to this small person who somehow understood more about courage and honesty than most adults ever learned. I love you. Infinity times infinity. I love you more than that. Infinity times a million. That's cheating. No, that's winning. They finished dinner, did homework, went through the bedtime routine. But Daniel's mind was already racing, forming words, building courage, deciding that tomorrow he would find Emma and tell her the truth without hiding behind noble gestures or professional distance. Tomorrow, he would be brave. Except tomorrow had other plans. Daniel arrived at the office at 7 a.m. to find Margaret waiting with an expression that meant catastrophe. Coleman filed a lawsuit, she said without preamble, against the company and you personally. He's claiming breach of fiduciary duty, mismanagement, and self-dealing related to the DataVision acquisition. Daniel felt the floor drop out from under him. What? He's alleging you paid above market value for DataVision because you wanted to bring Emma onto the team for personal reasons, that the acquisition was driven by romantic interest rather than business judgment. Margaret's voice was tight with anger. It's complete fabrication, but he's filed in Delaware Chancery Court. This is serious, Daniel. He can't prove that because it's not true. The acquisition was vetted by our entire M&A team, approved by the board. He's claiming the vetting was superficial because you pushed it through, and he's got depositions scheduled for everyone involved in the acquisition process, including Emma. Daniel sat down hard. This was worse than a board vote, worse than politics. This was legal warfare, public accusations, the kind of thing that destroyed reputations regardless of the outcome. When did he file? Yesterday. Process server tried to deliver here, but you were already gone. Tried your apartment this morning, but you'd left early. They'll find you eventually. Margaret paused. Daniel, this is bad. Even if we win, the discovery process will be invasive. Every communication about the acquisition, every interaction with Emma, all of it becomes evidence. Let them look. There's nothing improper. The acquisition was sound business. What about your relationship with Emma? He's going to paint everything as evidence of bias. We don't have a relationship. We're colleagues. That's all it's ever been. But you want more than that, Margaret said gently. Anyone with eyes can see it. Coleman certainly has. He's going to twist it into something ugly. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, feeling the careful control he'd maintained crumbling. Does Emma know? Not yet, but she will soon. Her deposition is scheduled for next week. Cancel it. Settle this before she gets dragged into it. Daniel, we can't settle. That would be admitting wrongdoing. It would validate every accusation Coleman is making. Margaret leaned forward. We fight this. We prove the acquisition was legitimate. We demonstrate that your judgment was sound, but you need to prepare for this to get ugly. The day deteriorated from there. Daniel's lawyers arrived by 9, armed with strategy documents and dire warnings. The lawsuit was comprehensive and vicious, alleging a pattern of self-interested decision-making, claiming Daniel had lost perspective, suggesting he was unfit for leadership. It was everything Coleman hadn't been able to achieve through board votes, packaged as legal claims that would take months to resolve and cost millions to defend. At 11, Emma burst into Daniel's office without knocking, face flushed with anger. Tell me this isn't true, she demanded, throwing a copy of the lawsuit on his desk. Tell me Coleman isn't actually claiming you acquired my company because you wanted to date me. Daniel looked at the document, at the ugly insinuations printed in legal language. It's not true. The acquisition was legitimate business. I know that. But Daniel, he's got dates and times of every meeting we had, every email exchange, every moment we spent together working on the integration. He's making it look like some kind of corporate romance novel. He's twisting facts to fit his narrative. It doesn't matter what it means. The accusation exists now. Every client, every investor, every employee is going to read this and wonder if there's truth to it. Emma's voice cracked. I've spent my entire career building credibility. One lawsuit and suddenly I'm the woman who slept her way into a tech company. No one who knows you would believe that. You're not listening. It doesn't matter what people who know me believe. This is public record. This follows me forever. The Seattle position, they're going to see this lawsuit and withdraw the offer because they won't want the controversy. Daniel stood, moving toward her. Emma, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. If I could take it back. Take what back? The acquisition? Working together? Caring about me? She laughed bitterly. That's the problem, isn't it? None of this would be happening if we'd just stayed professional. If you'd kept your distance. If I hadn't... She stopped, but Daniel heard the rest anyway. If I hadn't fallen for you too. I'll settle the lawsuit, Daniel said. I'll give Coleman whatever he wants, just to make this go away, keep you out of it. You can't settle. Margaret already told me. It would ruin your reputation, validate his claims, probably cost you the company. Emma wrapped her arms around herself. There's no good solution here, Daniel. Either you fight and drag both of us through months of ugly discovery, or you surrender and lose everything you've built. Then I fight, but I'll keep you protected. My lawyers can challenge your deposition, claim it's harassment. That makes it worse. That makes it look like you're protecting me because we're involved. Emma's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Don't you see? Coleman's already won. Either way this plays out, he's damaged both of us. Daniel felt helpless, a sensation he hadn't experienced since Sarah died. Tell me what you want me to do. Anything. I want you to let me leave. Take the Seattle job if they'll still have me. Get out of this mess before it destroys my career completely. She took a shaky breath. And I want you to fight Coleman without worrying about me. Prove the acquisition was sound. Win this case. Save your company. At the cost of losing you. You can't lose something you never had. The words were meant to be pragmatic, professional. They landed like a knife to the chest. Emma, I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm so sorry. But I can't be the reason you lose everything. I won't be. She turned toward the door. I'll cooperate with the deposition. Answer honestly. Make it clear the acquisition was legitimate business. That's all I can do. Wait. Daniel's voice stopped her at the threshold. Before you go, I need to tell you something. She turned back, waiting. I was going to find you today. Before all this happened. I was going to tell you that I was wrong. That asking you to take the Seattle job was me being a coward. That I care about you more than I've cared about anyone since Sarah died, and that terrifies me, but I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions. Daniel held her gaze. I was going to ask you to stay. Not for the company, not for work. For me. For us. For whatever we could build together if we were brave enough to try. Emma's tears spilled over. Daniel, don't! I'm not asking you to stay. Not now. Not with this lawsuit hanging over us. I'm just telling you the truth because my son reminded me last night that courage means being honest even when you don't know how it will turn out. He managed a sad smile. So there it is. The truth. I'm in love with you, Emma Sinclair. Completely, inconveniently, probably foolishly in love with you. And if circumstances were different, I'd fight like hell to convince you to give us a chance. And now? Now I'm asking you to save yourself. Take Seattle if you can. Build the career you deserve. Let me handle Coleman alone. Daniel's voice was steady despite the pain. But know that whatever happens, these last months mattered. You mattered. You reminded me that life is more than just surviving. That's a gift I won't forget. Emma crossed the room in 3 steps and kissed him. It was desperate and brief and tasted like tears and goodbye. When she pulled back, her hands were shaking. I love you too, she whispered. That's why I have to go. Because if I stay, every decision you make will be questioned. Every success will be attributed to favoritism. I won't do that to you. Emma, fight Coleman, win, prove that your judgment is sound and your leadership matters. Then maybe... She didn't finish. They both knew maybe was just a kind way of saying probably never. She left, and Daniel stood in his office feeling like he'd been hollowed out. The lawsuit document sat on his desk, 47 pages of accusations and insinuations. His lawyers would arrive soon with strategy and timelines and battle plans. But first, Daniel had a call to make. He dialed Victoria Stern directly. I heard about the lawsuit, she said before he could speak. It's vicious, even by Coleman's standards. I need the board's support. Unequivocal, public support that the acquisition was legitimate and my leadership is sound. You'll have it from some of us. Others will wait to see how the case develops. That's not enough. I need unanimous support, or I need resignations. No more fence-sitting. Daniel's voice was hard. Coleman filed this lawsuit as a board member. That's a direct attack on the company he's supposed to be governing. Either the board stands with me or they stand with him. They can't do both. Victoria was quiet for a moment. You're forcing people to choose sides. Coleman already forced that choice. I'm just making it explicit. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Call an emergency board session, tonight. I want to vote a confidence on record before this gets uglier. Daniel, that's risky. If you lose, I won't lose, because the board knows the truth. The acquisition was sound, the integration succeeded, and Coleman is making baseless accusations because he couldn't win through legitimate means. Daniel's voice softened slightly. But Victoria, I need to know who I can trust. I can't fight a legal battle and a political one simultaneously, so let's settle the politics now. Tonight, 7 p.m., I'll make the calls. The board session was smaller than usual. Only 8 members could attend on short notice. But 8 was enough for a quorum, enough for a vote that would matter. Daniel presented his case with surgical precision. The acquisition metrics, the integration results, the timeline showing every decision was made before any personal relationship developed. Because there was no relationship to develop, he explained carefully. Just mutual respect between colleagues that Coleman was weaponizing into something it wasn't. The lie tasted bitter, but it was necessary. The truth, that he'd fallen for Emma somewhere between midnight debugging sessions and honest conversations, would only fuel Coleman's narrative. This lawsuit is a distraction, Daniel concluded, an attempt to damage the company because one board member couldn't get his way through proper governance. If you believe my leadership has value, if you trust that I've always acted in the company's best interests, I need you to say so publicly. A vote of confidence that sends a clear message. Cross Technologies stands behind its decisions and its leadership. Thomas Wright spoke first. Daniel, no one questions your dedication to this company, but the lawsuit raises legitimate concerns about judgment. Even if the accusations are false, the appearance of impropriety is exactly what Coleman wants you to focus on, Victoria interrupted sharply. Appearance over substance, innuendo over evidence. If we let that guide our decisions, we might as well hand him the company now. I'm not suggesting we hand him anything. I'm suggesting we be cautious about making definitive statements while litigation is pending. Caution is reasonable. Cowardice isn't. Victoria looked around the table. Daniel has led this company for 12 years. 12 years of growth, innovation, and ethical leadership. One baseless lawsuit doesn't erase that record. We either believe in him or we don't. The vote, when it came, was 6-2 in Daniel's favor. Not unanimous, but strong enough to matter. The board issued a statement that night supporting Daniel's leadership and characterizing Coleman's lawsuit as unfounded and detrimental to shareholder interests. Coleman responded by escalating his legal claims. The next 6 weeks were brutal. Depositions, document production, legal motions, and constant media attention. Every decision Daniel had made regarding the DataVision acquisition was scrutinized. Every email was analyzed for hidden meaning. Every interaction with Emma was framed as evidence of improper motivation. Emma's deposition was scheduled 3 times and postponed twice as both sides maneuvered for advantage. Daniel's lawyers fought to limit the scope, arguing her testimony was irrelevant to claims about his judgment. Coleman's lawyers insisted she was central to the case. Meanwhile, Emma had withdrawn from daily operations, working remotely to avoid the media circus that had descended on Cross Technologies. Daniel saw her once, briefly, passing in the hallway. She looked exhausted and haunted, and he wanted nothing more than to pull her into his arms and promise everything would be okay. Instead, he nodded professionally and kept walking, because anything else would be ammunition. The Seattle offer was withdrawn. Citing recent developments, the firm apologized and selected another candidate. Emma's response was a one-line email forwarded to Daniel without comment. Congratulations. Coleman got exactly what he wanted. Daniel wanted to break things. Wanted to call Coleman and scream until his voice gave out. Wanted to burn it all down rather than watch Emma pay the price for his choices. Instead, he worked with his lawyers, prepared for trial, and tried to be present for Liam, who'd started asking why Daddy was sad again. Just work stuff, buddy. Adult problems. Is it about Emma, the lady from your office? Daniel was continually amazed by his son's perceptiveness. Yeah, it is. Did you tell her you love her like I said? I did. And? And sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the world makes things too complicated. Liam frowned. That's a sad ending. Yeah, buddy, it is. 2 months into the litigation, Daniel's lawyers found it. The smoking gun that would end Coleman's lawsuit and career simultaneously. Email communications between Coleman and a competitor, discussing ways to destabilize cross-technologies, sharing confidential board information, coordinating the lawsuit timing to maximize damage. Coleman hadn't just filed a baseless lawsuit. He'd committed corporate espionage. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. Daniel's lawyers filed it with the court along with a motion to dismiss and a countersuit for damages. They also referred the matter to the SEC for investigation. Coleman's lawsuit collapsed within a week. He resigned from the board, settled the countersuit for an undisclosed sum rumored to be substantial, and disappeared from the tech industry entirely under the shadow of regulatory investigation. It should have felt like victory. Instead, Daniel felt empty. He'd won the battle, but Emma was still gone, her career still damaged, her Seattle opportunity still lost to Coleman's machinations. The day the case was officially dismissed, Daniel stood in his office staring at the settlement documents and felt nothing but exhaustion. Margaret found him there an hour later. It's over, she said quietly. You won. Did I? Coleman is gone. The board is unified behind you. The company's reputation is intact. She paused. But you lost Emma. Yeah, I did. So go get her back. Daniel looked up. What? You heard me. The lawsuit is over. There's no legal impediment, no professional conflict. Just two people who love each other and are too scared or too noble to admit it. Margaret smiled gently. Go get her back, Daniel, before she convinces herself to move on. She hasn't been at the office in weeks. I don't even know where she is. She's been working from the coffee shop 3 blocks from her apartment. The one with terrible Wi-Fi but good pastries. Margaret set a piece of paper on his desk. That's the address. In case you were wondering. Daniel stared at the paper, then at Margaret. How did you? I'm good at my job, which includes making sure my boss doesn't throw away his chance at happiness because he's too busy being noble. She headed for the door. Go. Now, before you think about it too much and talk yourself out of it. What about the afternoon meetings? Canceled? You're taking a personal day. First one in 3 years. She left, and Daniel looked at the address, at the possibility it represented. He could go. Could walk 3 blocks and find Emma and tell her it was over. They were free. They could finally explore whatever this was between them without lawsuits or board politics or professional complications. He could be brave. His phone buzzed. A text from Liam. Did you win your case? Maria told me. Daniel typed back. Yeah, buddy. We won. Good. Now go tell Emma. Be brave like you told me. Daniel smiled despite everything. Infinity times infinity wisdom from a 7-year-old. He grabbed his coat and left the office, walking 3 blocks through Manhattan, afternoon crowds to a coffee shop with mismatched furniture and the smell of cinnamon. Emma sat in the back corner, laptop open, completely absorbed in whatever code she was writing. She looked up when his shadow fell across her table. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It's over, Daniel said finally. The lawsuit. Coleman confessed to corporate espionage. He's gone. It's over. Emma closed her laptop slowly. I heard. Margaret sent me the settlement summary. Of course she did. She also sent me your deposition transcript, the part where they asked about our relationship, and you said there wasn't one, that we were just colleagues working toward a common goal. I had to say that. Anything else would have... I know why you said it. I'm not angry. Emma's voice was carefully neutral. I just wanted you to know I read it. All of it. Every careful deflection, every technical truth that avoided the bigger truth. You protected me even when it would have been easier not to. There was never a question of not protecting you. I know. That's who you are. She paused. So why are you here, Daniel? The lawsuit is over. You won. The company is safe. You can move on. Can I? Why couldn't you? Because I lied in that deposition. We're not just colleagues. We never were. From the moment you crashed into me at the airport, you've been more than that. Daniel pulled out the chair across from her. Can I sit? She nodded. I've spent 2 months trying to convince myself that letting you go was the right thing. The noble thing. That you deserve better than the complications of my life. Daniel held her gaze. But my son, who's 7 and apparently wiser than me, pointed out that being noble is just being a coward with better publicity. So I'm here to be honest instead of noble. Okay. I love you. Completely. Inconveniently, probably foolishly love you. I love how you see patterns in code that no one else notices. I love how you fight for your team and your work with everything you have. I love how you made me remember why I built this company in the first place. Daniel's voice roughened. I love that you see me. Not the CEO, not the suit, not the performance I put on every day. You see Daniel Cross, the person, the father, the man who's terrified of failing everyone who depends on him. And somehow, you don't run screaming. Emma's eyes were bright with tears. Daniel, I'm not done. I love that you called me out at the airport for being oblivious. I love that you care about code quality at 2 a.m. I love that you remembered my son's name and that you understood why I had to let you go, even though it was killing me. He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. I love you, Emma. And I know the timing is terrible and the situation is complicated, and you have every reason to tell me it's too late. But I had to tell you, I had to be brave. Emma was crying openly now. You're an idiot. I know. A brilliant, infuriating, noble idiot who thinks he has to save everyone even when he's falling apart himself. Also accurate. I lost the Seattle job because of you, because Coleman's lawsuit made me toxic. Every firm in the industry saw my name connected to corporate drama and decided I wasn't worth the risk. Her voice broke. I've spent 2 months rebuilding my reputation, taking contract work, trying to prove I'm more than just a cautionary tale. I know. I'm sorry. If I could fix that, let me finish. I lost Seattle, lost 2 months of my life to legal stress and media attention, and people asking if I really slept my way into a tech acquisition. Emma finally took his hand. But I didn't lose you. Even when I was telling myself I had to, even when it seemed like the only reasonable choice, I couldn't actually let go. Because I love you too, you idiot. I've loved you since you stayed until 4 a.m. fixing code you didn't have to fix. Since you believed in my work when everyone else saw it as just an acquisition. Since you looked at me like I was extraordinary instead of just competent. Daniel felt something fundamental shift in his chest. Emma, I'm not done either. I love you. And I'm terrified because I watched my mother fall apart when my father left, and I swore I'd never let anyone have that kind of power over me. But here we are, and you already have it, and I can't seem to care about the risk anymore. She squeezed his hand. So yes. Yes to trying. Yes to being brave. Yes to whatever this is if you're willing to figure it out together. Daniel stood, pulling Emma up with him, and kissed her like he'd wanted to for months. Like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Like finally they could stop pretending this wasn't exactly what they both wanted. When they broke apart, Emma was laughing and crying simultaneously. What now? She asked. Now we figure it out. Together. No more noble gestures or careful distance or protecting each other from complications. Daniel cupped her face. I want messy and real and honest. I want late-night conversations and code reviews and someone who calls me out when I'm being an idiot. I want you, Emma. All of it. What about Liam? He'll love you. He already told me I should fight for you. 7-year-old wisdom. And the company? The policies about relationships between executives and employees? You don't work for me anymore. You've been contract since Coleman's lawsuit started. We'll make it official. You'll report to Marcus, operate as an independent consultant, whatever we need to do to keep it ethical. Daniel smiled. I've spent 12 years following every rule and policy. I think I can figure out how to structure things properly. Emma nodded slowly. Okay, then yes. Let's try. Let's be brave together. They left the coffee shop hand in hand, walking through Manhattan streets that suddenly felt full of possibility instead of just obstacles. Daniel called Margaret to officially change Emma's employment status. Emma called her team to announce she was coming back to the office. They made plans like normal people who were allowed to care about each other without lawsuits or board politics. It felt like breathing after months of holding his breath. That night, Daniel brought Emma home to meet Liam officially. His son took one look at them together and announced, "Finally, I was wondering when you'd stop being sad, Daddy." They ordered pizza, played board games. Emma taught Liam a coding trick that made him laugh with delight. Daniel watched them interact and felt something he hadn't felt since Sarah died: completeness. Not replacing what he'd lost, but building something new alongside the grief that would always be there. After Liam went to bed, Daniel and Emma sat on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "This is going to be complicated," Emma said quietly. "Your life, my career, Liam adjusting, people at the company talking, the media probably commenting. Probably. And we're doing it anyway? We're doing it anyway." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "I'm done letting fear make my decisions. Done being alone because it's safer. Done pretending I don't need people." "Good. Because you do need people. And I'm volunteering to be one of them." 6 months later, Daniel stood in the same boardroom where Coleman had tried to force him out and presented a very different kind of announcement. "I'm restructuring executive leadership," he told the board. "Effective immediately, I'm creating a chief technology officer position to oversee all technical operations and report directly to me. The role requires someone with deep technical expertise, leadership experience, and vision for where technology is heading." He paused, meeting each board member's eyes. "I'm offering the position to Emma Sinclair. She's been consulting with us since the lawsuit settled, leading our most critical technical initiatives, and frankly, she's the best CTO candidate I've seen in my career." Daniel set down his presentation remote. "This is a merit-based decision. Her qualifications are extraordinary, but I also need to disclose that Emma and I are in a personal relationship. Have been for 6 months. We've followed every protocol to manage potential conflicts of interest. She reports to Marcus Chen for accountability purposes. We maintain professional boundaries at work, but I want the board aware before they vote on her appointment." Thomas Wright spoke first. "You're asking us to approve your girlfriend as CTO? I'm asking you to approve the most qualified candidate for the position, who happens to also be my girlfriend." Daniel smiled slightly. "If that's a problem, vote against it. But do it because you question her qualifications, not because you question my personal life." Victoria laughed. "After everything that's happened, that's refreshingly honest." The vote was unanimous in favor. Emma started as CTO the following month. She was brilliant and demanding and pushed the technical teams to excellence they hadn't known they were capable of. She and Daniel worked together with the kind of synergy that made the company stronger, challenging each other, building on each other's ideas, creating something neither could have achieved alone. They were careful about boundaries, professional at work, personal at home. But everyone knew, and nobody cared because the results spoke for themselves. Liam adored Emma, called her his friend Emma, then his dad's Emma, then eventually just Emma, who was part of their family now. They had dinners together, went to museums, built increasingly complex Lego structures. Emma taught Liam to code. Liam taught Emma about Pokemon. They formed their own relationship, independent of Daniel, which he loved watching develop. A year after the lawsuit settled, Daniel took Emma and Liam to the beach house in the Hamptons he'd bought as an escape but rarely used. They spent a week being normal, swimming, building sandcastles, reading, laughing, being a family in all the ways that mattered. On the last night, after Liam was asleep, Daniel and Emma walked along the beach under stars that seemed impossibly bright away from the city. "I need to ask you something," Daniel said. Emma looked up. "Should I be nervous?" "Maybe." He stopped walking, turned to face her fully. "We've been doing this for 18 months now, building something together. You, me, Liam. It works, Emma, better than I could have imagined." "It does." "So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to make it official. Not just dating, not just my girlfriend, not just Liam's friend Emma." Daniel pulled a small box from his pocket. "I'm asking if you'll marry me. Build a life with us. Be a family officially instead of just practically." Emma stared at the box, then at Daniel, tears already streaming down her face. You're serious? Completely. I love you. Liam loves you. We want you permanently, officially, infinity times infinity. That's Liam's line. He gave me permission to use it, said it was the best way to tell you how much we want this. Emma laughed through her tears. You asked your 7-year-old son permission to propose? 8-year-old now. And yeah, I did, because this affects him too. He had opinions, very specific opinions about the ring, actually. Daniel opened the box, showing a simple platinum band with a single perfect diamond. He approved this one. It's perfect. Is that a yes? Emma threw her arms around his neck. Yes, absolutely yes to all of it. The proposal, the family, the life together, yes. Daniel kissed her like he had that day in the coffee shop, like she was everything he'd been afraid to want and brave enough to claim anyway. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Emma was smiling through her tears. I can't believe this is real. Believe it. We earned this. Every complicated, messy, imperfect piece of it. They walked back to the beach house, hand in hand, past the room where Liam slept, to the bedroom where they'd spend the night planning a future that felt impossibly bright. The wedding was small, just family and close friends in a garden ceremony that Sarah would have loved. Daniel told Emma that before they exchanged vows, standing under an arbor covered in white roses, she would have loved you, he said quietly. Would have been happy I found someone who makes me want to be brave. I wish I could have met her. Me too. But I think she'd approve of us. Of this. Daniel squeezed her hand. She always wanted me to be happy, to build a life full of love instead of just work. I think we're doing that. Yeah. I think we are. Liam was the ring bearer, taking his job with utmost seriousness. He handed over the rings with a whispered, Don't mess this up, Daddy. She's the best. Daniel whispered back, I know, buddy. I won't. The vows were simple and honest. Promises to be brave, to be present, to build something extraordinary together. When the officiant pronounced them married, Liam cheered louder than anyone. At the reception, Daniel's team gave toasts that were equal parts touching and teasing. Marcus joked about how Daniel had spent months being miserable before finally getting his act together. Victoria praised Emma for being brave enough to take on not just Daniel, but the entire company. Margaret simply said she'd known from the beginning and was glad everyone else finally caught up. As the evening wound down, Daniel found Emma standing alone watching Liam dance with Maria. Happy? He asked, pulling her close. Incredibly, this whole day has been perfect. Even the part where Liam announced during the ceremony that he was getting a mom and that made him the luckiest kid ever? Emma laughed. Especially that part. He's not wrong. We're the lucky ones. All three of us. Daniel kissed her temple. I never thought I'd get this again. A family, a partner, someone who sees me completely and stays anyway. I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me now. Infinity times infinity? Infinity times a million. Liam taught me well. They stood together watching their son dance, watching their friends celebrate, watching the life they'd built from airport collisions and corporate warfare, and the courage to be honest about wanting more. It wasn't the life Daniel had planned. It was better. 3 years after the wedding, Cross Technologies announced its most ambitious initiative yet, a global expansion into sustainable technology infrastructure, led by CTO Emma Cross and backed by the company's strongest financials in its history. The project would create thousands of jobs, revolutionize how developing nations access technology, and cement Cross Technologies as an industry leader. At the press conference, reporters asked Daniel about the risks. Risk is part of innovation, he said simply. The question isn't whether to take risks, but whether to take smart risks, backed by solid strategy and brilliant people. We have both. And it doesn't hurt that your CTO is your wife, one reporter asked with a smile. It doesn't hurt that my wife is the most talented technologist I've ever worked with, Daniel corrected. The fact that I get to go home with her every night is just a bonus. Emma rolled her eyes from her seat beside him, but she was smiling. That night, after the press conference, after the celebration dinner, after Liam was asleep, Daniel and Emma stood on their apartment balcony looking at the city lights. We did good today, Emma said. We did great. That initiative is going to change everything. I meant us. We did good being us in public. Professional but real. It's getting easier. Yeah, it is. Daniel pulled her close. Thank you. For what? For being brave when I wasn't. For calling me out when I needed it. For teaching me that letting people in is strength, not weakness. He paused. For crashing into me at that airport and changing everything. Emma turned in his arms. You know what I learned from all this? What? That the best things in life happen when you're brave enough to be honest about what you want, what you feel, what you need. We could have spent years dancing around this, being professional and careful and safe. Instead, we got messy. Instead, we got real. And real is so much better than safe. Daniel kissed her, tasting truth and promise and the future they'd built by choosing courage over comfort. Behind them, through the open door, they heard Liam call out, Dad, Emma, can you come here? They found him sitting up in bed, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur. Bad dream, buddy? Daniel asked. No, good dream, but I woke up and wanted to make sure you were both still here. Emma sat on the edge of the bed. We're here. We're always here. Promise? Promise, Daniel and Emma said together. Infinity times infinity? Infinity times a million, Daniel confirmed. Liam smiled, satisfied, and lay back down. Good. Because you're my family, all three of us, and families stay together. Yeah, buddy, Daniel said softly. They do. They stayed until Liam fell back asleep, then returned to their own room, to their own bed, to the life they'd built from wreckage and courage and the willingness to believe that love was worth the risk. Daniel Cross, billionaire CEO, single father turned married father, man behind the suit who'd learned to let people see the human underneath, fell asleep that night with Emma in his arms and Liam safe down the hall and a company full of people building extraordinary things together. He'd lost Sarah and thought he'd never heal. He'd faced Coleman and thought he might lose everything. He'd fallen for Emma and thought the complications might destroy them both. But they'd survived. More than survived. They'd thrived. Because at the end of every turbulent journey, after every collision and crisis and moment of choosing courage over safety, there was this: a family built on honesty, a love built on seeing each other completely, and a future that looked less like survival and more like joy. And that, Daniel thought as sleep claimed him, was more than enough. It was everything.